Thank you. Thank you. Again, welcome everybody. We're going to start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and believe it or not, there's not a flag in the house, so I put my flag right up on the little board there. It's a little lapel pin. I didn't want anybody pledging to me, so we're going to pledge to that flag up there. So if everybody will just stand and join me in a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. It's good to have Carlos and Anna Lee here again today with us in our second of 3 workshops. We're going to go ahead and get started. It looks like we have a board representative from all of our member governments. Mariella Smith, I think, will not be joining us until noon today. That's my understanding. Catherine, I hear she should be here around 9:15, and Kathleen somewhere between 9:15 and 9:30. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I think we have enough to get going. And the only comments I wanted to make were, first of all, I really appreciate the efforts that our staff has gone to get this set up today, and all of you for making the commitment to being here. We had a good first meeting a couple months ago, and we have another one later this month. So with those 3 workshops, I think we're long overdue. I don't know where this workshop will lead us today. At the end of the meeting, we'll know, have a better feel for that. And the only comments that I wanted to make are that I think this Tampa Bay Water is a pretty doggone good example of regional cooperation. And so to that end, I'm very proud of its history, very proud of the part that we get to play at this point in that 40-year agreement that was done originally. And for me, there's 5 things that we need to continue to take a look at and to continue seeing the commitment, continue being introspective, look in the mirror, make sure we're doing it right. One is that our member governments must be basically committed to Tampa Bay Water being the sole and exclusive provider of water to the region. That is what we're here to talk about today. Secondly, the board, as members of those member governments, need to be regularly conversant and decisive in strategic planning and clear in its direction to Tampa Bay Water staff. And I'm going to be proposing, I talked to the previous chair briefly along and found that we should have been considering it this year, but I think we're going to go to a every month meeting next year, starting in January. And to the extent that we probably will have 10 or 11 meetings, and if we have a workshop in there, we'll substitute a meeting for a workshop. We're not going to add on to those 10 or 11 meetings. But I think, and even if they're shorter, that's okay. But I think it's important. There's a lot going on right now that we regularly converse on that. So to that end, that's the second thing, a more regularly engaged board. The third thing is that our member government utility directors must reflect our member government's perspectives, and they must be actively engaged. And I think we've got really good utility directors doing that work. The fourth thing is that our Tampa Bay Water staff needs to be fully developed and the necessary skill sets to implement our strategic plan. And that's critically important, that they set up a most effective and efficient way possible to operate this organization, and that we have really sound succession planning. And then the final piece, I think we need to have a very engaged, strong leader at the general manager level. All 5 of these things, I believe, are critically important if we continue the success of Tampa Bay Water going forward. And again, thank you for just a couple of minutes before we get started. And with that, I will turn it over to Anna Lee or Carlos, whoever is going to start this morning. Thank you all.
And I'm going to turn it over to Carlos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought that was very, very helpful. Those are some very appropriate remarks for this workshop. I'm going to keep my mask on, but if you have trouble hearing me, because I tend to speak loud anyway, so I'm speaking loudly, so I'm going to keep it on, but if you have trouble hearing me or understanding what I'm saying, I'll take it off. So you just let me know. First, really what I had on here, because it's just amazing to me, is congratulating you all for the Tampa Bay Lightning 2020 has to be the oddest year I know in my life, and I think in most of our lives. Who would have known that Tampa Bay would win the Stanley Cup, and it would do it in Edmonton, Canada, and it's just an amazing thing. So congratulations to the Tampa area. I know that you're all very, very proud of that. And thanks to the staff for setting this up again in a manner, in a very difficult situation, in a manner that's workable. And a lot of work goes into this, and I think all the board members appreciate it, and certainly the two facilitators greatly appreciate what you have done. So the first item on the agenda is a review of the agenda and the ground rules. So let's just review the agenda really quickly. This will go very fast. The first thing we're going to do after I sit down is Annalee's going to come up here and do a warm-up exercise. It's really a getting to know you better exercise, and we'll spend a little bit of time on that. And then the next three items, really, items 3, 5, and 6, I'm taking the break out of it, 3, 5, and 6, are really the heart of this facilitation. It's really when we're going to get into a very substantive matter here, and we're going to do it in a way where we're going to be considering the interests of all the different member governments as we work through this issue that is there, that the Tampa Bay Water is sole and exclusive wholesale potable water supplier, considering, for example, reclaimed water as a potable water source. So those three items will take really the most of the time in our facilitation today as we work through it. When I get up to do the beginning of that, of those three items, I will explain how those three are related and how we will work ourselves through it. Then we'll have a lunch break, and then at the end, we will be considering what our next steps are, given the discussion today. Obviously summarizing what we did today, and just a short review of the workshop, and any comments that you have on it about good or bad or things that ought to be different. Now, the ground rules you already developed, and they were sent to you as part of the meeting summary. But I'll just briefly state them. So these are the ground rules for the facilitation that you all put together last time. Be open-minded, don't dismiss any idea out of hand. Keep comments and questions to the point. When necessary, agree to disagree. Avoid personal attacks. Respect time limits. Be careful of body language. Don't interrupt. Help each other understand the views of members. Listen for what people don't say. And by the way, both Annalee and I have been doing this for quite a long time. That's the first time we've seen that ground rule, and we really like it. So, even though it's kind of hard to do it with a mask. Include background information to inform the discussion. Respect the ground rules, and use icebreakers to share personal information. So those are your ground rules. In a way, the way I usually like to summarize it, because it's a way really to handle these kinds of meetings. Speak in a way that you would want people to listen to you. Speak in a way that you want people to listen to you. And listen in a way that you would want, so that people would want to speak to you. So if you just follow those two guidelines, it'll probably fit all the ground rules that you have. But these are really good ground rules. Does anybody think there's any other additional ground rules that you want to add to this meeting? Anything? We're all good? So we're going to go with those ground rules. You can come in. Okay, So with no further comments on that, I'm going to turn it over to Annalee.
Okay, so last time we had you meet in small groups and share some kind of personal information with the other members, and then you came and introduced yourselves to each other. Carlos and I feel that you don't have too many opportunities to have those kinds of conversations, and it seemed to us that you enjoyed it last time. So we wanted to build on that today, and I have a worksheet that tells you what we have in mind for the warm-up, and it builds on what we talked about last time. So what I'd like to do, we're not going to break into small groups this time. We're just going to share as a big group and take a few minutes and think about some of the things that you talked about the last time, career highlights, what you like to do outside of work, things that people may not know about you, and think of a story that you would like to share with the group that builds on that. So for example, Commissioner Starkey talked about she likes adventure travel. So maybe she would share a story about one of those trips that she took. Or you might share with us how you came to love what you do. Some of you talked about gardening as a passion. So how did you come to love to garden? Or maybe we'd like to hear from Councilmember Miranda how he got interested in horse racing. And then the last thing, if you would like to share how you've been coping with the pandemic, coping or not. So who wants to start?
You really want to tell about horse racing?
Yeah, well, if you want.
All right, I'll start from the beginning, but it'll take me a week. It started when I was a young kid in Ybor City, believe it or not. There was a lot of horses. At least on every block and a half or 2 blocks, there was at least somebody had a horse. Somebody had 1 or 2 cows in the backyard, and it was like living in the country, but living inside the city. There was chickens all over the place. There was goats. There was everything. And that was the way of life then. I'm talking about the mid-40s. And as life went on, I got involved again with horses with a group called the West Tampa Sharifi Association. Everybody that was a member had a horse. So in Palmetto Street in Glen, there was 3/4 of an acre, and this was already in the 60s. And we had 12 stalls for 12 horses. So everybody that wanted to belong to the Sharifas, most of them had a horse. So where all the stadium is at there on on Del Mabry, between Columbus Drive and Tampa Bay Boulevard, it was all vacant land, all of it, all the way, from Himes to Del Mabry. And a lot of times we go cut hay to give to the horses. And we used to race there on weekends, a bunch of nuts like myself. So the family got involved with horses. The daughters rode horses and one thing or another. Then as I remembered when I was 16, I went to work up at the Sagamore Hotel in Boat Landing, New York. The guys that wanted to pay me $100 a day for me to drive them from the hotel to Saratoga and back, about a 30-minute drive, because they like to have a couple of drinks, I certainly took that offer. And they went to where? The racetrack. So there was a lot of horses. In fact, one horse that both the attorney that sat on the board of the stock market, he had 2 horses that day. One was called Call the Witness. Being an attorney, he named one Call the Witness. And the other was named Queenie. Well, they both ran and they both won. So I said, hell, why should I drive for 100? I'd rather do what they're doing. So I worked my way back to Tampa, and years went by, and I bought my first horse with 2 other associates for $2,700 at the sale in Ocala. And that's a story in itself because we only had $3,000. So the opening bid on this horse that nobody wanted, it never had a bid. It was our bid for $2,700. Her name was Able Maid. Able Maid was a skinny little horse, about 16 hand tall with a chest about this big. And they laughed at me when I bought the horse. My partner said, "You crazy?" I said, "Listen, I told you the next horse through." That was it. The mother was named Disable Maid, and it stayed in my mind. So I drove back to Ocala to see why the mother was named Disable Maid. I found out the 2 legs up front worked and 1 leg in the back dragged. She only had a hip at birth, somebody got kicked or something. To make a long story short, Able Maid trained for about 4.5 months. We couldn't find a race for her with fillies, so we raced her against the boys the first time. She had a bad post 1 going into a turn. It was only 660 yards. And she finished second by that much against the boys. We take her, the track closes, so we had to train her in a pasture behind a pickup truck, May holding the horse and the other guy driving the truck around so we could keep her in shape. We take her to Miami to run in a maiden special weight, which is a good race. And who do we face? Secretariat's first daughter named Messina by a champion mare named Madonna. Anyway, and it was like the Kentucky Derby, all kind of cameras, and I go up and I said, "What the hell is this?" He said, "Well, you're racing against Secretariat's first baby." I said, "Forget that horse. She ain't going to win. This horse will annihilate her." She hated horses. Even when she galloped in the morning, if a horse come by, she'd try to bite the horse. She hated him. So guess who won? Able Maid. The next day, they write an article in the Miami Herald saying that the horse that we beat trains faster than Able Maid runs. Now, me being the mouth that I am, I go see the trainer. I say, "Listen, hey, hotshot, come here. Why don't we race horse for horse? Whoever wins takes a horse, and we bet 100,000 each." I didn't have 100,000, but I said it. He turned it down. 3 weeks later, we go back to Miami to race against the second horse, a horse that had won second Secretariat filly, named Fable the Able. Guess who won there? Able Maid. Able Maid, later on in life, we retired her. She had a baby named Able Money. And we retired her because she got a $20,000 fee to a horse called Distinctive, which we won the stakes named Distinctive, and they gave us a breeding to the horse. Able Maid's daughter won the Triple Crown for fillies, the Power is the Comedy and the Mother Goose. Wow. And the story goes on from there. Thank you all very much. You don't have to be smart, you got to be lucky.
Okay, what a great story. I appreciate your kicking that off. Who else has got one?
My turn?
Sure.
I don't have a horse story like that.
Oh, no. He's hard to beat, isn't he?
My horses, I think it rained every time one of our horses we had was going to have a race, and it rained. And finally, in the horse's name, there was a bank group that had this horse, and we named it Banking on Sloop. So it was doing good. We expected a lot to happen, but it rained every race that we had. And it just kept it. So I said, well, it finally did good after about the second, third race. I said, yeah, you came in second. They said, you did? I said, yeah, I came in second. So last. So it kept on, but all these rain things happened. But I said, this horse don't start winning and changing the way they're going to do this. I said, we're going to change the name of this horse from Banking on Sloop to Sniffing on Glue. So, but that's kind of that story on that. But I have a daughter who's been in barrel racing years ago, and Ashley, she's 27, about 27 now. So, but her youngest daughter, I never thought would ride horses, and so she rides barrel horses, and she has done great. She's been as top as, I guess, 6th in the Southeast on barrel racing.
Wow.
For her age.
Wow.
She's 17, and about 3 weeks ago they had the first high school rodeo, and they turn this on before they pull a hook on me. But 3 weeks ago in the high school rodeo, the first time she joined this year, and the first time she ran, she won one night and was second the next night, so she was a winner overall for the high school rodeo for barrel racing here lately. So
Fun to
proud of them
watch,
doing
isn't it,
that.
when
So.
your kids are...
But I'm a lover of cattle, and I have about 300 head of cows that I run besides, and that's kind of like a hobby more than. At one time, we made money, though. We had $1,200 a calf was pretty good at one time. Now they're about $600-700 a piece.
Okay. Well, who knew you had that in common?
So, but I have one horse.
One horse now.
One horse now that actually, well, my daughters have horses, but I got one horse now that is a 5-gated saddlebred, and she won her meet in Richmond, Virginia the other night.
Very cool.
Pretty good. So,
Okay.
I'll continue with the horse theme. Just briefly, I bought a horse about 10 years ago for $500, only for riding and having fun, and got to know a lot of people at the stall. It was up in North Tampa, actually, off of Gun Highway, and just thought it was great. So I got to know a lot of people. We got to know a lot about horsing, mucking stalls, and all of that good stuff. And finally, they said, we're going to go on the Gasparilla Parade. So we took all of the horses down to the Gasparilla Parade, except mine stayed behind because they had to have somebody to clean up behind the horses, and that was my job. So that was the extent of my horse career. But I tell you what, they are wonderful animals, and just had a ball, just going out for rides with groups of people or by myself or whatever. But they just they knew your voice when you came. He always nickered, and it's just kind of a cool relationship. But I was thinking as you were telling the story, trying to remember back to what we talked about. Thank you very much. I hardly could remember back 2 months ago. But thinking about my love for baseball and the fact that the Lightning won a couple nights ago. The Rays started. They need to win 13 games. They're down. They got 12 to go now. And my love for baseball, and it started back when I was a little kid, and I always wanted to do things with my dad, and he loved baseball. So we started watching baseball when I was back in 1967. Became a Cardinal fan because my dad was. So I've always loved baseball, always followed it, so when I got to a point in my life, I said, well, I'm going to start coaching. I can't play anymore, obviously, and I played softball, hamstrings got pulled. I said, this is, for young men. So anyway, I started teaching or coaching and loved it. We won a World Series with a 15-year-old group, Little League World Series over in Kissimmee, Florida. Awesome experience. Got to know families, got to know kids, again, around the sport that I just loved. And then when I got into, being a commissioner in a city, I decided I couldn't coach anymore, so I started umpiring baseball. And so I've just been around it all my life. It's just one incredible sport with incredible people that are just down to earth, that love the baseball and love giving back to kids in the community. So a great part of my life, and I like to continue staying close to it. So anyway, that's all for me. Thank you.
It's kind of heartbreaking that we have such great accomplishments in sports in the area.
Yeah.
We can't go to the game.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, who else?
Yeah, probably a love of travel. I've been all over the place over the years. The best trip was some 8 years ago. My wife and I went to Japan, flew into Tokyo, and took the bullet train up into northern Japan. This was a year after the Fukushima meltdown, and my son took us to some of the areas that had been cleaned up because of the tidal wave. And it was all quite interesting. The real high point, and the reason we went, is because my son was going to marry a Japanese gal, and they got married in a 500-year-old Shinto shrine, which was seriously cool. The last night that we were there in their apartment, just before getting ready to head back stateside, my wife and I both woke up in the middle of the night, and to use a overused phrase, did you just feel the earth move? And she said, yes, but Stephen didn't get up, so we must be safe. And it was one of the aftershocks that had been rippling through the area. And then we took the bullet train back down to Tokyo, spent the night there, and then flew out on what is undoubtedly the longest flight I've ever been on. It was 20 hours from Tokyo to Newark, and cattle class. That wasn't so great, but the rest of the trip was a lot of fun.
Okay, sounds great. Who else?
I love to travel as well, but I'm the youngest of 7 children, and we grew up really poor, and so we never took trips. And my father was a cross-country trucker, and he would bring beef down to Winn-Dixie in Lakeland. I'm from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, and I would get really jealous because he used to go to Florida. And I, was in Chicago and never went anywhere and always wanted to see the world. And so he had bought a brand new truck, and it was when one of the first trucks, it was an International that had a sleeper behind the driver's seat. And so it was a mattress behind the seat, and it had a leather curtain. And whenever he'd bring the truck to the house, because we had a couple acres and he would bring the truck to the house every once in a while, I would always sit in the front seat and play with the CB radio. And I just loved that CB radio. And this is long before Smokey and the Bandit came out. And I loved the CB radio. And so I was 11 years old, and I decided that I wanted to be a trucker, and I wanted to be on the CB radio, and I wanted to see the country. So I hid in the sleeper and didn't let him know. And I packed a little knapsack and some snacks, and I hid in the sleeper, and I waited till he was in southern Indiana so he couldn't turn around and go back because there were deadlines. And I decided I would just pop out and let him know that I was there. And so we're in southern Indiana going down the highway, and I just popped my head out and said, "Hey, Dad." And we nearly got killed because he nearly crashed the rig. And he was so upset. He's like, "Oh my God, Rosemary's gonna kill me. Rosemary's gonna kill you. Oh my God, what am I gonna do?" And there was no cell phone, so he had to go to a truck stop and call my mother and tell her that I was with him. And he didn't know what to do, what he's gonna do with an 11-year-old girl while he's trucking down the road. And we had the best time. And my father was never close with his children because he never wanted kids. He just wanted my mother. And if kids came with it, fine, but he just wanted my mother. And he and I became best friends on that trip, and we were best friends ever since. So that was my first trip.
What a wonderful story. Okay.
That's a great story. Well, I'm going to go with the career turning point, and because I think with almost everyone here, I also serve on transportation committees of some sort with you. So about 20 years ago, when I first started working for the National Sierra Club, I was based in Florida, and my assignment was to work on fuel economy standards. And we had our 2 U.S. senators and a number of congressional representatives their votes were important on raising fuel economy standards so that cars and trucks could go further on a gallon of gas. And as part of doing this work in Florida, I came up with doing a really fun tactic, which was, just keep in mind, this was the first time hybrid cars had hit the market. So the tactic was to sort of race, if you will, a Toyota Prius against a Ford Expedition. And I drove the Prius, and stop at these places throughout Florida that were like beautiful parts of Florida that sort of exemplified the beauty of nature and our culture and our history here. And then we had fun kind of just doing comparisons of mileage comparisons and how much we were spending on gas and how much gas, blah, 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 on this trip. And of course, I may or may not have lost the keys at one stop, or rear-ended someone at a red light, but it was a really successful media tactic, and it led to a lot of work I did explaining alternative fuels and how hybrid cars work, and that kind of opened the door to how I started finding myself working on transportation issues years later. And another funny story that came out of it was that the road trip caught the attention of a publisher who did educational books and wrote algebra books. So if you happen to notice, if your kids or grandkids are doing an algebra assignment and there's problems about of fuel economy and cars racing each other, and you notice a picture that looks like a young Darden Rice in a 2001 Prius. Yes, that's me. So the trip was sort of memorialized in an algebra problem in algebra textbooks. That was fun.
Emblematic of a math problem. That's
Yes.
great. Okay. Mr. Murmas.
Okay, I really don't have anything as exciting as what you guys have done. So I feel like, oh my gosh, my life is so boring. Maybe I should, change gears, pivot to something really exciting. The pivotal point in my life was I had always been in sales. I mean, I graduated from college with a degree in marketing. There were only 5 women in business school at Indiana University, and went to work for a Fortune 500 company for many years and just loved that type of work. I love personal interactions and all that. And I think when I stopped working to have my daughter, I went stir crazy and got very involved raising money for a nonprofit. So I was still selling. And I think somebody just caught me one day and said, you have to run for office. And I hate to say this, but back then I thought of people in political office like car salesmen. Maybe that's still true today. I don't know, not really. But anyway, no, somebody recruited me. I had no idea. I had never been involved in politics. I think I voted in major elections, and but I knew I was pretty passionate about kids. And so that's really was the big turning point for me, is getting into public service. Huge for me, because then when I turned out, I went through so much withdrawal and anxiety of what am I going to do now, but really spent a good 6 years, and then somebody recruited me to run again for the county. So that's my excitement.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was quite a turning point.
Yes, it was.
Yeah. Commissioner Starkey?
Well, I'm kind of confused on what I'm supposed to talk about, but I've heard, are we talking about fun things in our life, or?
Yeah.
So,
Building on what we talked about last time.
okay. So one of the things
I
that,
thought you might tell us about one of your adventures.
okay, that's what I was going to say. I was trying to get a picture. So one of the things I mentioned about myself, or maybe the city councilman talked about it, was my love of adventure travel. So I was trying to think of which trip I would describe that was my favorite, because I was on an African safari, which was really cool. Did some really cool things in Costa Rica, but I think I would say that, and if you don't know about this, it's a great deal. That when you buy a Volvo, you can take delivery of it in Sweden, where it's manufactured. And I've done this 3 times, and it's a great deal. So it's called overseas delivery. And so on my second Volvo purchase in Sweden, my husband and I took our Volvo, and we drove down to Copenhagen and through Denmark. And as we were waiting for the ferry to go over to Norway, we were walking along the beach, and we came across German bunkers from World War II. It was amazing, all these dens and concrete, I don't know what you even call them, where you hide and have the guns. One of them had fallen on the beach, and we were climbing on it. We had no idea what it was. But we took the ferry over to Norway, and we worked our way up to this fjord. On the way there, we were supposed to catch a ferry and go on the fjord to the other end, but we missed it by about 15 minutes. But in order to get down to the bottom of the fjord from the top, we had to do switchbacks, and I mean like 100 switchbacks, and half of them were in the mountain. Which, I don't know if you've ever gone down a mountain inside on switchbacks. That was pretty wild. But we went to this fjord, and I think it's Hanger Ford. But anyway, we did this hike called Preikestolen, and this is kind of what it looks like. And if you saw that last Tom Cruise movie, they said they were in Czechoslovakia or somewhere, but or Czech Republic, but it was really this fantastic rock, that piece of granite that sticks out, I don't know how high, thousands and thousands of feet over one of the fjords. So that was probably one of the best hikes of my life. We had to stay at the bottom in a hotel, a little hotel at the very bottom, to be able to start climbing early because they bring bus loads of people there and it gets kind of crowded. But it's a 3-hour hike up. And then we went on to another fjord, and we rented bikes in this little town called Flom. And we went on the world's steepest train, I think it's a cog train. And then you get off at the top of this cool town called Myrdal, and then you mountain bike down the road that they used to build the train tracks, so the train. So it's called the Nav Road, and it's gravelly at the top, switchbacks, but then you're going through little Norwegian villages in the mountains, under waterfalls, over bridges of raging water, and it's just spectacular trip. So that was one of my favorite adventures that my husband and I did.
Sounds wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much for sharing those stories. Very interesting and really gives us an idea who we are as people. I'm going to turn it back to Carlos. We're going to talk about that really important, critical issue that you all identified when we interviewed you about Tampa Bay Water as the sole and exclusive provider. Okay, Carlos?
Okay. So the way we're gonna deal with this issue is deal with it in a manner that I have dealt with this issue with other water authorities and also in my mediation practice, which is really the way I think that all issues ought to be resolved. And it comes from dealing with an issue from an interest-based standpoint. And I'll explain that to you. I think that most of you can understand being in the positions that you're in your counties and your cities. When you deal with the issue from an interest-based standpoint, what you're saying is you're not going to deal with positions. So let's take an example. An example would be Walmart wants to build something within your county or city, and there's a neighborhood group that is opposing the Walmart being placed there. So the Walmart wants to build the Walmart. That's their position. The neighborhood group doesn't want the Walmart there. That's their position. If you go from those positions, you get nowhere, because you will get into the meeting and everybody will say, I don't want it there, I want it there. You don't get anywhere. So what you do is you say, back up. Why, say for the neighborhood group, what is your interest that you're concerned about regarding this Walmart? Because it's not the Walmart. It is something that the Walmart is doing, right? It is either aesthetics, they don't like the way it looks, noise level, traffic patterns, things of that sort. So then you take each of those interests and ask Walmart how they can satisfy those interests. Aesthetics, what storefronts can you do? Walmart has because I've done a number of Walmarts, but they have a whole bunch of facades that they can put in to try to take care of it, and they can even customize some of those facades. They can also do greater buffers. They can do more trees in the parking lot, things of that nature to take care of the aesthetics. The same thing with noise level. You can take those 18-wheelers and make sure they don't appear at your lot at that Walmart at certain hours. So now you're dealing with the interests of the neighborhood. The neighborhood at the same time has to deal with the interests of the Walmart, which are, they like to be open 24/7. So how can that be done? And that can be done perhaps by those 18-wheelers only coming in at certain hours, the parking lots being so far away from property lines, again, additional buffers, and now you're dealing with the interests. So that is called an interest-based negotiation. It's the way that and mediation, certainly the ones that I have performed, give you the best chance of succeeding in issues that are in conflict. Now, when you deal with the interest, the more specific you can be with the interest, the more chance you give the other side to meet that interest. So, for example, if you say, I don't like the noise of the Walmart, well, that's good, you've stated the interest, but be more specific, right? No, we don't want the noise within these certain hours. Or we don't want the noise within these certain hours and this type of noise. So the more specific you can be for each interest, the better it is for the person that is trying to deal with that interest to help you out with that. And so this is a process where both sides are looking at each other's interests and trying to meet those interests as you move along. And sometimes you really have to dig hard. But most of the time, if you work from that standpoint, at the end of the day, you have an agreement. And I can't tell you that you have 100% of the time that you have agreement, but I can tell you it's a very, very high percentage. And if you don't reach an agreement, at least you've negotiated and you've worked it through in a very collaborative fashion that helps you for any kind of a future conflict. So we're going to approach this way, this issue. And the issue or the matter that we want to discuss today is that Tampa Bay Water, as sole and exclusive wholesale potable water supplier, considering, for example, reclaimed water as a potable water source, which, as we all know, is one of the things that you're now considering, and it has been something that has been being dealt with in the last couple of years within Tampa Bay Water. So we're going to be dealing with that, and then if you look at those three items, like I said, number 4, number 6, number 7, they're together. But each one is a step. So the first step is articulating that interest. So I'm going to go around and ask all of you to give me your interest. What are the things that are important to you regarding this statement about potable water supplier and the reclaimed water? What is it important to you, obviously to your constituents, and why? So there will be no interruptions during that discussion. We're going to go around. I'm going to probably, when I stop talking, I'm going to give you like a minute or two to kind of think about it, and then I'm going to start with someone. And we're going to go around, and your interest doesn't have to be one interest. It can be, you can state 5 interests. You know, there are 5 things that are important to you from that matter. State all 5 of them, as specific as possible. And then we will go, when I finish, I'll ask again if anybody wants to, because obviously the first person that goes sometimes is at a disadvantage. They may have thought of something else, but we'll go around again and we'll get everybody's interest. So because you're first or second, don't worry about it. We'll go around again and get those interests. So you're stating the interests as specifically as possible, explaining why, and there are no interruptions. We're listening. You're taking notes of questions you may have about that person's interests. That certainly do that, because that's going to become important. So then we go to the second step.
Carlos, can I add
Sure.
something? We have deliberately done a seating arrangement so that we put the 2 representatives from each county together. Carlos will start with the more senior member of each county's membership, and then the other member from that county will have an opportunity to add. Well, all the cities are kind of scattered. That was the. I put the 2 Hillsborough County representatives together, the 2 Pinellas. I know.
No.
If you want me to sit as a commissioner, you're going to have to pay me like one.
No, Commissioner, until this morning, we thought she was going to be here virtually.
Right.
That's why. We thought she was going to be here virtually. It wasn't until this morning we found out she won't be here until noon. Yeah.
So you will carry the water for Hillsborough County on your own, I'm sure very ably. Carlos mentioned you would want to, since you're not going to be able to interrupt, you may hear some things that you would like to jump in and say something about. Just hold that to the time when we're going to be discussing. But make a note, and make a note particularly if there's anything that you hear that's new, that you might not have realized before. Because this is the opportunity for all of you to let the other folks here know what's really important to you, what really matters to you. Sorry, Carlos.
Right. So again, first step, get as specific as possible with those interests, no interruptions, and we'll go around until we capture everybody's interests. Now we move into the second step, which is item number 5 in your agenda. And that's where you will have an opportunity to discuss that interest and say, basically it's your response. You agree, you have concerns, you don't understand, could you explain further? There'll be a full discussion so that everybody can understand each other's interests. Now, a lot of these interests are going to be the same, we realize that, but there's going to be some that are not, or likely. I mean, if it all works out that all the interests are the same, we're in great shape. But there are going to be most likely some that are not, and we'll be discussing those and getting as much detail as possible, and clarifications if need be of those interests by the parties. And that's the second step, is really understanding what has been said. And then we move to the third step, which is brainstorming. Always an interesting term when I hear brainstorming. I feel like 2020 has been brainstorming us. And brainstorming is, how do you bridge the gap? Given a party's interest that, may not be precisely your interests, how do you bridge that gap? And Annalie's going to explain more of that. She'll be heading up the brainstorming session. But basically, the way I look at brainstorming at first is any idea is a good idea. You just put it out there. And then don't be afraid. I mean, there'll be sometimes there's like some really crazy ideas, but we're just wanting all those ideas because that crazy idea may lead somebody to a better idea. Or that crazy idea that sounded crazy at first is not so crazy once you look at the way things develop. So we want to provide all of that as far as bridging these gaps between the different interests of the parties. So like if I go back to that Walmart example, if somebody could say, well, we want half the parking lot to be a buffer zone, with all these trees. That may be seen crazy from a land use standpoint, but at least gives everybody the other side the idea that buffer is important to that person, and that perhaps we can do something that resembles that by creating a smaller buffer, but perhaps adding more trees to the parking lot itself, things of that sort. So any idea really at the brainstorming end will be helpful as we put that down. And then after all of those 3 steps, then we'll see where we're at. And Lee, you want to add anything to that? Okay, so let me make sure I didn't miss anything. I think that pretty well covered it. So give you a couple of minutes to think about what is your interest in this, and the proposition that I mentioned that's in your agenda, and then I'll go around the room and ask you that.
So what really matters to you about Tampa Bay Water as the sole and exclusive provider? What really matters to you about the possibility of having reclaimed water as a potable water source?
Yeah, by like 6 months.
4 miles. So I go through all of this. I usually say what I want. I go through all of it, explanation, all of that. And I break into breakout rooms, and I talk to the developer and the property owner. And I go to the county side. The county said, there is no way whatsoever the dollar store is going on. And I said, why am I here? why didn't you tell this to the other attorneys? I mean, absolutely no way the dollar store is going on. I didn't mean for this to be a break. I didn't realize it would take it as long. I should have realized it.
Isn't it amazing that they have that
That is gorgeous.
unique gate? They have to be trained. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But what a beautiful picture.
They're bred to kind of do that.
Gosh, these are great stories.
Yeah.
I was going to get up and do my horse story, which I do have a horse story. And I think Charlie would enjoy this. When I'm Cuban born. When we were in Cuba, my two brothers are a little bit older than me, just went out and bought a horse. We lived in the outskirts of that. They went out and just bought a horse, a beautiful horse. We had uncles that had horses, so we rode horses when we went to the farm. So they just bought a horse home, which my mother, it was a terrible horse, threw it back. And then they went out, my mom and they got a horse, and it was a beautiful stallion. This guy was unbelievably beautiful. And so my two brothers had to take care of him, kids are kids, and they have enough trouble with a dog, let alone a horse. And one day, they came up with the idea of, why do we have to brush this horse all the time? Why don't we vacuum clean him?
Councilmember Rice?
And they brought him into the garage and started vacuum cleaning. And as soon as that horse felt that vacuum cleaner, destroyed the garage. Absolutely destroyed the garage. And my dad almost destroyed my brother.
We're going to go ahead and get started.
All right, let's get started. Let's call everybody in. Oh, yeah. All right, everybody come back in. Yeah, let's start. I actually didn't mean this to be a break. We're having a break, but it'll work out. Is Commissioner Starkey around, or, okay. Let's give her maybe 30 seconds here.
Because she's my senior. I feel younger. She's my senior.
I see. I actually, I don't know who's senior, so we'll. I'm going to start, I already talked to the chairman, I'm going to start with the chairman. So, you know, always good to put the burden on the chairman.
She's the senior member of the two of us.
Okay.
She's been on the board longer than I have. She's been on your board? She's not on the water? No, but she's been on my board.
Well, no, we're
County
talking
board, I thought that's where you were talking about, representing the county.
Who's been on this board longer? Me. Is that you?
No, we're talking about in the county.
You've been on here longer on this board.
On this board?
Oh, that may be true. Because Jack was a member on here when I first came on. So on Tampa Bay Water Board, I might be
Yeah,
the same.
that's what we know.
Yeah.
Tampa Bay Water Board.
Unless you've been here before, I don't know that.
And I don't know that either. I don't think so. Because I think it was Jack, Mariana.
Sure.
Last meeting, I asked that utility directors be here with us for this meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Did that not get out? I know, well, I didn't know that. So I'm just kind of, I mean, we're elected officials and we don't always know all the ins and outs like the utility directors do. And I think for me in this discussion, I'd love to have them here. That's,
Yeah.
but anyway, it's okay. I mean, we'll get through it.
I thought that
You-
was,
You've been on this board so long.
Oh, I mean, I know what the issue is, but it's nice to have
Yeah,
like utilities.
yeah, I don't think, I think that was kind of up to you to plan for that. Let's go ahead and start, Carlos.
all right, let's begin. So I talked to the chairman, and he's going to start us off with stating what he feels the interest of
Yeah.
his jurisdiction is.
Yeah, and again, I think this will be good. We'll go around, and as I start to hear what Commissioner Merman says, I might want to, later on, as we go around again, or as Commissioner Oakley says, we'll learn from each other as we do this, and hopefully we get more specific, to your point in the beginning.
And that's correct.
so-
Everybody needs to kind of relax on this,
Yeah.
because the
So-
more you discuss it, the more it'll be easier to do. Just remember
so-
not to, when you're doing the interest, not to interrupt,
Yeah,
and that we can, and then we'll have the next segment is the one where you have a good discussion where you can give me more explanation
okay.
and things like
So,
that.
so for me, what interests that we're talking about, and to Annalee's point about what really matters to me, is, and I have 5 things. What really matters to me is that we ultimately have no issues with the existence of Tampa Bay Water, but rather ironing out our collective strategic direction for individual strategic interests. So to me, it's really important that we are in the same boat together, even though we may be wanting to go in different directions, but that we're committed to being in that same boat together. So to me, that's what really matters to me. That's a really, at the basic of probably of what we're talking about today. But so that's one. 2,
Mr. Chairman, let me, just, you're doing a great job. Just know that Lee is writing this.
I understand.
So when everybody is doing it, just know, and she's great at it, but give her a little bit of chance. And you were
well,
timing
no,
it.
I'm articulating as I go here. I've got my notes here, so I'm going to talk through it, and I'll try
she'll
to be
be able to do it.
try to be sensitive to the
Mm-hmm.
what she's doing. Then what's really important to me also is that we have regional solutions to a basic need in this Tampa Bay area. So, in other words, if we can't be collectively working together on a basic need, what other issues are we going to have that are far more complicated? So I think regional solutions to a basic need is a real interest to me. We have to continue showing that we can be in the same room, having the same discussion, and working together for a solution. I know Tampa Bay Water doesn't need to be a political tool, but they've earned a good spot in our area, and so we need to continue being a good model. And for me, if we can't be on the same, rowing in the same direction on water, then economic development, transportation, all the other stuff pale by comparison to this very basic need. So for me, that's important. And then maximizing the benefit of water source, like potable water. Maximizing the benefit of potable water, or excuse me, reclaimed water, is really important. So as it relates to water consumption. So some people have said that they want to use it for potable water source. Others have committed big dollars to using it as irrigation. Some use it for business purposes. The idea in all cases, I would assume, is that it is to maximize water supply, stretch it as far as we can go. And you can do it through irrigation. You can do it through commitment to a good pipe infrastructure in your community. You can do it through a lot of different methods, but that we continue to maximize. So I think in some ways, sharing with each other the good and the bad and the ugly of our own utility system exposes us to, self-evaluation, self-criticism, but also constructive thoughts from others. And I think we talked about the utility directors getting together, and those are the professionals that actually are probably on the same page on a lot of things and really talk to each other. To Commissioner Merman's comment a minute ago, they really talk to each other and understand each other's challenges and how they can help each other. So that's important to me. And minimizing the effects of capital or risk on each of our communities. So by sharing this effort, whether it's improved water quality, we as a body can get shared money from SwiftMud. I get better water quality, but I don't have to put all the money out. We're doing it as a region, and so there's some synergy in sharing that risk, providing a water quality project or another water supply project, or for crying out loud, a mitigation project. So we're figuring out ways to save water. We can do that. Again, we can do it individually, but I think collectively there are benefits to it. So I said about water quality and diversity and just what's also really important to me is that we continue exploring the diversity of water sources for us. I mean, and that includes reclaimed, it includes, well, it includes Sharp project, it includes all of that. So anyway, that's all I had. And I'm sure we can be more specific on those as we go. But
And it's, yeah, but I think those are pretty well explained. But, again, in the next segment, if people have any questions about that.
they can ask you. No, I'm kidding.
It's always good.
Okay. So I concur on all of those. He was a little more articulate than I would have been. I care about water quality as well, but I also care about what is still remaining in the water, right? So, are we getting the pharmaceuticals out as best as we think we are? Is there new technologies to get that and other elements out of the water? Is testing every 5 years the right thing to do to ensure water quality? Now there may be lawsuits on something that might be in the water that we didn't even know about. So is there a way to use science to better ensure water quality? And again, I would agree on preserving potable water and how we can be diverse and using science for other creative ways for potable water. But I also think it's important that we, as we look at this and move forward, we always have to take a look at the cost to our ratepayers, and how we can keep our cost to the ratepayers down and not make it exorbitant for them, so for a basic need.
Having lived through the water wars in the 70s, 80s, and 90s in Pasco County, where some of the governments to our south were essentially draining our lakes dry, the creation of Tampa Bay Water is something that I view as a extremely positive development, because it has helped make it possible for our environment to recover. And as the chairman pointed out, having regional solutions is just critical. We're all in this together, be it water, be it major transportation issues, being other environmental concerns, air quality, et cetera. They don't stop at the city limits or the county lines. They cover this entire region. On the specific question of reclaimed water as a potable water source, I think ultimately we're going to have to grapple with that, and I'm pretty certain that Newport Richey doesn't want to go it alone to try to clean up that reclaimed water and insert it into the water system. On the other hand, if we're working with Pasco County to get reclaimed water lines that go down to a water treatment facility down in Anclote, where we've talked about having seawater to freshwater conversion at some point in the future, that starts making a little more sense. Let Tampa Bay Water take the lead on that, making sure that the water is in fact clean, that we don't have the pharmaceuticals that have been mentioned, and the other contaminants in water that then goes into people's taps. I think we can do that job a lot better by working as a group, and I think it's something we're going to have to look at, and I think it's something this particular board is up to the task of. We can do it.
Okay.
So just so I understand, Mayor Marlowe, what's important to you is that you draw on the resources of the collective.
That's correct.
To accomplish.
We are together far more than some of the individual parts. Working together, we can make things happen that none of us individually can do. Just none of us are that big. But together, we're a pretty big group. So
You are. You are. What did we decide? Who's the senior on the board? There was a.
So we think that Ron then is the, we're not sure.
We'll break even, but I'm older, so I'll take it.
Really? You're a smart man.
I'll give her a break, so. But I was thinking about Tampa Bay Water and the use of reclaimed water for potable water in the future, and I was thinking about these things, and what really came to mind to me about Tampa Bay Water and the idea of being able to reach out and find new sources for water in the future, which is very important for each and every one of the members. So I'm real thankful for whoever thought up the idea of putting us all together and making it to where it sticks, it doesn't break apart, and we're all here for the same reason. We're all here to help each other financially or in whatever way we can, and new ideas or whatever to put together and keep Tampa Bay Water as our wholesale producer of water, and they're the only one. But in fact, each of us have a voice on this, and I think Reclaim Water, Pasco County has a very different role because Pasco County's major development of its county and the different developments we have with housing and all come in at a time we can put reclaimed water lines in along with water lines so we are watering people's yards with reclaimed water and have that use. Whereas when Pinellas came in and Hillsborough came in the city of Tampa, they had all concrete. It's too expensive to go back and put those lines in. So we sit there with the benefit that others are not able to share that type of benefit. But in the same token, we're sitting at the same table that someday in the future, with all the growth we're having, we may run out of our sources of water, and so we're going to really have to sit down and look at making reclaimed water maybe a potable water. Today, we put it back in the ground where we put it out there on 52 at 4G Ranch. Underneath the ground, it moves from the location we put it in to the northwest. And it moves toward a well field that we at Crossbar Ranch that's been there for years, but I honestly believe, and I think my utility directors believe, that we're helping that well field be able to produce more water. So it's going in the ground, but underground it moves toward that well field. So there's uses there, but
How long is that 4G, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
That's all right.
How long has that 4G ranch project been going?
about 3 years. About 3 years.
Okay.
And we've won awards with that project. I mean, it's a very good project,
Yeah.
and we're able to put that water out there and all. Another idea in the future for reclaimed water is the possibility of using it for fire protection. You ever thought about using reclaimed water as fire protection instead of using potable water for fire protection? The good use of that water, and that water's very, pretty clean, so it's no issue environmentally to hurt anything. The only factor that it needs to be in a system that can be pressurized to where you keep the pressure up so it gives fire protection. So it's very important to have pressure. In Pasco, we don't have that ability right now, so I've talked to the utility director about some of that. But I'm so thankful that the group that got together to put this together as a regional wholesale water for this whole region is pretty fantastic when you think about it. And it's not easy to tear apart. As we went through a lot of discussions on reclaimed water, we're still together, and I think we're stronger together today than we were before we started talking about those things. But I think we also have a common area that we need to be strengthened by, helping the city of Tampa with their water, or Hillsborough and Lower Hillsborough, without it costing them too much money. Because I think developing of those water uses in the future are very important, and they're very expensive to be doing. So, but as a group, I think it's really very important that we all sit on this board. And I think one day in the future, it'll come to the fact that we'll be using reclaimed water as potable water. Because I'm going to think we're going to give out of sources. You want to get certain areas. I mean, our reservoir is full now. They just told me we had enough water in now that's full, which is a great thing for whenever this rainfall stops and we go into our dry season.
We're old enough to know that that doesn't happen all the time.
So it's a great thing. And being able to keep our pumping of water from the ground at a minimum for all the uses we have for water. So,
Okay.
Can I make sure I've got your points, Commissioner Oakley?
Was that?
I got what's important to you is that Tampa Bay Water sticks together and doesn't break apart.
Right.
That Tampa Bay Water uses reclaimed water in new development in Pasco County.
Yeah, I think somewhere we have to meet at one point in time, because it belongs to each county, our reclaimed water. Somehow we're gonna end up either sharing or whatever, I guess, in the future. It'll be a big part of another water source that we'll use. It may not be today, and we've kind of figured it can't be today because there's a lot of research need to go into making sure we do not environmentally mess up our water source.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about 4G Ranch, using reclaimed water to ensure the future water supply, finding uses for reclaimed water is important to you, and you mentioned fire protection, and helping other member governments meet their water needs without costing too much money? Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
And I didn't mean to cut you off if you had more.
No, that pretty well covers it. But
Okay.
Let me just ask that question just for my own clarification on number 4, and the fine uses for reclaimed water. Do you feel that finding those uses is should be done by, say, the local government, the county in this case, as opposed to, say, the Tampa Bay Water? Like finding particular reclaim uses?
Any county or member, if they can figure out ways to use reclaimed water where they've been using potable water, it allows you to have more potable water for the uses that needs to be for. So if any time you can replace potable water source, like in irrigation and things, like if we could do this on fire hydrants and all that, protection with fire, if you use potable water, that relieves, I don't know how much water you can find in those fire, but they have to be pressurized. And so if you could replace that with reclaimed water, then that allows that water that would be fresh, potable water to be used for that. So, for drinking water, whatever, so you'd save it. So it'd be kind of a replacement and have a use. But those things that I think will need to come in the future, so. But, and we're growing leaps and bounds, so how long is it before we really need those extra sources, so.
Yeah. It'll be soon, I think.
Yeah.
They
And
call
I
it
just think it's going to be very important that each member
yeah.
try to help other members.
Yeah.
And that's what we're here for.
They call it a retirement tsunami that's coming to Florida. Commissioner Starkey?
Yeah, so, our family's property was greatly affected by the overpumping back in the day, and lots of Pasco County properties were affected. Our lakes dried up, our wetlands died, and it was a bad thing. And so I think coming together and putting Tampa Bay Water together was brilliant. So one of the things that's important to me is that no more environmental damage occurs, especially in our county, because that's where it was all happening. It's kind of unusual for other counties and cities to own property in another county, like what's going on in our region. I think that I'm looking at our interlocal agreement, the amended interlocal agreement, section 3.09, under reclaimed water. It says, except as provided in section 3.08, the member government shall retain the exclusive right to develop, own, and operate facilities for reclaimed water. So when I read that, I think reclaimed water is a little separate from the pumping and now the reverse osmosis, plant that we have going on, and the other ways that Tampa Bay Water has looked to find new sources. So I'm okay with us dealing with our reclaimed water in the way we want, as long as Tampa Bay Water stays strong and financially stable. So for me, the reason we have Tampa Bay Water is to stop environmental damage and to be able to have a continued, reliable water source for the region and to make sure we can take care of future growth. So those things are paramount to the health of the Tampa Bay area and cannot be jeopardized. And so we need to stay together for that. But if reclaimed water, and if the counties and cities, if they have it, can do something with that doesn't jeopardize Tampa Bay Water, I'm okay with that. I think we haven't raised our rates in forever. We have a humongous, reserves. And so I feel Tampa Bay Water is very stable. And so I'm happy where we are today. And again, my main thing is no more environmental damage and the long-term health, physical health of Tampa Bay Water.
Okay. Councilwoman
And I
Moran.
would agree with making sure our water is good water.
Mm-hmm.
You know, making sure it's safe to drink. That's big.
Okay. Councilman?
Are you sure you want me?
Of course. Well, I'm not sure, but I have to say.
Well,
of
I
course.
understand. Don't forget, we both got the same first name.
I know.
But let me just say this, and I'm not here to praise anyone or to bring anyone down or anything else, but, you know, when you look back at life, there's a beginning and there's an end. For me, for all of us here, for our family, for our grandkids. In fact, the earth is going to end sooner or later. I hope it's later. But when you look at how we got elected and when we first got elected, where you at from when you first started to now, whatever period of time that was, in '74, when I first got elected, there was about 20% of the population in the city of Tampa had septic tanks. About 18% of the city of Tampa had wells. And we realized that environmentally that was not the right thing. So you go knock on some door and tell them, listen, you're not going to be able to use your septic tank and your well is going to be gone, and you think you're not going to kick back, you'll be surprised what you get. But it took 5 or 6 years, and we made arrangements like you talked about, Mr. Alvarez, about the Walmart, and we talked to them about benefits and ratios, and we gave them a cut rate and how to hook up to the system. And within 10 years, it came down to under 1%. And I don't know what it is today. I haven't kept up with it. But when you go back and listen, and I've heard of many discussions here, and it comes down to me, I'm just thinking, it ain't about the city of Tampa, or it's not about the city of Tampa, it's not about each individual government. Put yourself in the city of Tampa. I'm not the chairman. I'm just a member here. And by the way, the seat that I have here does not belong to me. It belongs to the mayor. But for whatever reason, they have time not to do here, so they somehow appointed me. And I've been here now since '98 minus 4 years that Aurelio was in office, and that's how I'm here. So what would you do if you represented the city of Tampa? What would I do if I represented Hillsborough, Pinellas, Pasco, Newport Richey, or St. Petersburg? And those are the things that I look at. What would you do if you were in my shoes? Answer that, and you answer your future. I'm not here to boast about the city of Tampa. I'm not. And I've heard about reclaimed water now since 1998. And what's been done? Zero, nada. And it's not about, is it feasible? Do you have the technology? If it isn't feasible, the people in Atlanta will be dead. The people in Washington, D.C. would all die of an infection before COVID-19 came on. The people in California would have half the population because they've been drinking it for years. Israel, New Zealand, Australia, they all drink the water. So I'm not here to sell it, but sooner or later, somebody's got to take that step. And the city of Tampa said, we'll do it, we'll drink our own water. Some people don't want to drink it, you don't have to drink it. However, you have to take it as it comes. When you look at the automobile, electric cars are not new. They were here in the 1900s, the beginning of the century, 1900s. But they're new today. It's the same theory as reclaimed water. This bottle of water, if you leave it out next to a window for 60 days, you would get sick, because this plastic, you're liable to be drinking plastic inside the water. And I'm not a scientist, and don't possess to be one. But what I'm trying to say is, we're not any better than anybody else. We live in the same region as everybody else. Certainly the developing county like Pasco County is going to grow quicker than most of us in the next 10 years. Pasco County is going to have the same problems Hillsborough County has today. And that's how you got to look at it. Pinellas is about built out. So you have to take all into consideration and put it in. And Mayor Marlowe City, he's going to have problems because a lot of people, 1,000 people a day move in to Florida. My own family tells me, why don't you stop it? And I said, well, you tell me, smart. How do I stop it? I can't build a wall. The Mexicans ain't going to pay for my wall. So what am I going to do? You got to start doing what you have to do to make life more accessible to everyone when it happens. So you got to plan. I don't plan no more. I used to have a 10-year plan for my life. Thank God I cut it down to 5 because I'm going to be 80. So I'm not smart. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I vote the way I see it. Some people like it. Some people don't like it. But it's got to be about the whole system, not anti or for or whatever. If you were in Tampa, what would you do? That's a question I pose to each and every one of you. When you have 82 million gallons a day that you can process. However, when it rains, I watch the weatherman every day. Not because I want to be a weatherman, because I won't be one because I'm not that smart. So I look at the weatherman and they say, we're 4 inches behind last year. But what they don't tell you is last year you were 4 inches before the year before. So in essence, you're even. So I look at those things and I try to analyze what they're saying. And when you watch the weather, they say, now we're about only 3/4 of an inch behind last year. In September, you had a fantastic water supply, right? Rain every day. Now let's see how smart we are. Where did it go? Have you used it? It went into the bay. It went to the storm drainage and out. We didn't save 1 ounce of that weather. Not 1 drop of water did we save. Now ask yourself why. If you can save it, you may not need reclaimed water. See, water is like life. And water, when you need it, you don't have it. When you don't need it, you have more than you need. And that's how it is. So it's the reverse of things. When I look at that, I tell myself, what a shame that we didn't save 1 drop of water, not 1 drop, to all of us. Shame on all of us, including me. That we didn't save 1 drop of water to save for the future so you won't have to do and spend millions and millions of dollars on a water supply. As far as I know the city of Tampa didn't save any because it runs off. We did put, years back, 25 years ago, something under Greco's administration, we put 1.2 billion gallons of water underground so we can pump in February, March, April, and May until we run out. But isn't it a shame that we can't get a permit? I guess, I don't know, maybe the city of Tampa hasn't thought about it. I've never discussed it with an elected official other than here today. Not 1 drop of water the city of Tampa saved, where they could have, if they could put another 2 billion gallons of water, and all the counties did the same, how much water would you need to buy? Answer that to yourself. Do you have a water plant that can handle it? I don't know. There's so many things we could do that we've never thought of. We talk about the automobile, we talk about electric cars, now there's hydrogen cars coming on, Nikola, whatever the name of the company is. All these things are going on at the same time. And what difference, and please don't take this out of text and say, look what he said. Let's say the city of Tampa was not involved in Tampa Bay Water. Would you be the same? I believe so. Would you, if Tampa's in, would you be the same? You'd be the same. Why? Either though we're put in for 6 million gallons a day, do we do 6 million gallons a day? Don't ask me that, look at the records. I'm not trying to speak of anything else but the facts that I see, not as a candidate, not as an elected official, but as an average Joe just out in the street walking around and saying these guys are spending money looking for something to build to save water when it rains and we're not saving any water. The availability that this government has, all of us, is unanimously larger than what we have now. There's 55, 60 million gallons a day of reclaimed water going into the bay. The bay is better now in the city of Tampa area than it was 50 years ago. Why? Because we made it a priority. Did we really make it a priority, or was that the only option we had? You got to look at it both ways. And you look around, and reclaimed water didn't work for us. Maybe what the commissioner spoke about, it was too costly and not enough revenue to support it. So we're looking at making it drinking water. The whole world is doing something like this. You got to think, like I said, I used to think for 10 years in my life. I cut it down to 5 because I realized, 10 years, the odds are against me, so why should I plan for 10 years? But this body should plan for 100 years, not 10 years. But have we really done that? It ain't about who leads. It ain't about the manager. Don't blame the manager. Blame the 9-member governments that are here. Are we the smartest one to sit here, or should the water director sit here? I ask myself those questions all the time. And you learn not when you succeed, you learn when you do not succeed. When you're succeeding, everything is easy. So you have to go back, take a step back. Are we doing the right things all the time? I'm not one for words, I'm one for action. And that's how I've always been.
Let me ask you if I'm hearing you correctly.
I don't know if you could understand what I said.
I heard you say it's important to you to use the resource
For all of us.
for the benefit of the region.
And everybody's got the same resource we have.
And I also heard you say that it's important to you to take advantage of the available technology.
Correct.
Okay. And these have to do with both of them reclaimed. Okay. Anything else?
Wait, let me ask a question. Within the context of the interlocal agreement, and this is really to understand your thoughts on it, is Tampa happy within the context of the interlocal agreement as far as regional water sources, knowing that Tampa has not an exception, but it has a certain rights under the interlocal agreement. And I guess what I would ask is, going forward, within the boundaries of the interlocal agreement, is this something that you feel Tampa would be okay with because of the regional benefits that also come about because of the interlocal agreement?
Mr. Alvarez, the question is a great question. The city of Tampa is just like the other 8 entities. You're part of something. When, let's say there's 9 players here, so you have a baseball team. It takes 9 players to play a team on each side. Then you have a bench reserve. So we're not filling up the bench reserve. We're just talking about the 9 players. So what I'm trying to get the point across is that when you look at just the 9 players, every player here has a government that can do something better than what they're doing now. I'm sure that some others here have reclaimed water. I'm sure they're using it to the benefit of what they can at the present time, but are they using it for the benefit for the future? I don't know that. I've heard comments in the past years, oh, you can have the water, I don't want to drink. That's fine, I understand with that. I understand some people don't want no fluoride in the water system, others do. So it's an area that it's always, because it's a public need and necessity, and the individual's got to think of what they think is right or wrong. But in the context, Tampa is not here to say, we're leaving, we're staying, none. But what I'm trying to say is Tampa could be a much more bigger player in helping the people around by using, you have a permit of 82 million gallons. Tampa's plant could grow much quicker and do more than 82 million at a lesser cost than building a new plant or doing whatever. But for whatever reason, parochial or not, boundaries or not, districts or not, mentally or not, it won't happen. I don't think it'll ever happen. That's just my feeling. You can't be just for Tampa or against Tampa. What can Tampa do to make it better or make it worse? There's two sides to every story. And if St. Pete has it, or Pasco has it, or Hillsborough has it, go do it. I'm with you. But don't just say no without looking at the parameters of what's going to be in the next 30 or 40 years and how much money you're going to spend on doing it, when it can be done for half the cost. That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Okay.
all right. Mr. Merman?
Thank you. Charlie gave my speech, so he did an eloquent job. And I think maybe that's what I've been trying to say these past couple of years is put yourself in my position. How would you feel if you were a commissioner in Hillsborough County? You know, growth is forcing us to change. And I'm not sure we have all embraced that yet. And how it's changing is changing the dynamics of each member government and how they're addressing. Some are not growing. Some are grown out. Some are, you know, we're going so rapid. I mean, 30,000 new residents every single year. You know, we're in Pasco. I keep telling you guys, you should just take everything I say and save it in a box, because you'll be saying that in about 5 to 7 years. Because I know the builders, I know where they're going, I know what you're approving, and I see it. It's going to happen to you. So I guess all I can say is we have to consider new resources. And, you know, I think that our local government, Hillsborough County, feels that it owns the reclaimed water. We own our own reclaimed water, and we should be able to do with it as we want without having to go to Tampa Bay Water for approval. And I don't want to make war with anybody, but that's kind of the way the law reads now. We're trying to find economical water, sufficient water for our citizens. And, you know, we just had to raise rates because we haven't raised them in 20 years or 15 years for all kinds of things in Hillsborough because of the growth. And I get that, but we should be able to make reclaimed water available to our citizens without Tampa Bay Water approval. And I don't know that, I mean, our staff feels that way. We don't really discuss this as a body at the county commission, but I would imagine with the growth and the issues that we have, probably I would say they would feel the same way. I mean, we're very much in the same mode as really the city is, because they're experiencing growth also. I do, if we decide today to go direct to potable, you know, it's because we have to. We have low flow in Sun City Center, where our senior citizens live. Right now, somebody in Sun City Center cannot get a good flow out of their faucet till midnight. Midnight. And the only answer we can give them is you have to wait 2 or 3 years till we get this pipeline in. So put yourself in my shoes. I mean, it's a dilemma. And I have been feeling this. I mean, I don't want to make enemies here. I don't want anybody to think I feel bad about Tampa Bay Water. I don't. I was a legislator that approved it in 1997. I was one of them. I went to the bill signing with Governor Childs. I believe it. I still believe in it. But everybody, I think we have to decide is what place is Tampa Bay Water going to have in the game. And I do think Tampa Bay Water can do a great job of assisting us with technology for reclaim. Absolutely. And I think our citizens will expect that from us. But they also have been expecting better water quality, which we haven't been able to deliver them the past few years. So the level of trust is a little shaky on what Tampa Bay Water can really deliver, except for, in their minds, they think they're paying higher rates because we have a regional cooperative. So I'm just trying to be honest. If we're going to lay it all out on the table, that's what people are thinking. And I think each of us here have different priorities. And I know you're here to help us get consensus on priorities, but you can't change the 30,000 new people coming into Hillsborough County every day when they don't have that. And how do we get consensus when growth is affecting us so much that we just, we have to do what we need to do for our citizens. And
Commissioner Merman, if I may, basically what you're saying, if I can just capture it for a second, is that given the incredible growth in Hillsborough County, that reclaimed water, the reuse of that in a fashion that will help deal with that growth, that you feel that from a regional standpoint, or a Tampa Bay Water standpoint, that they cannot act fast enough to deal with that growth.
right.
That the county is better able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't. I mean, I had to question the demographic information they used, and I started back in 15, and it just took really until 2 years ago where they finally woke up and said, yeah, I mean, you know, numbers were they needed to look at our numbers from our planning commission so that they could understand what the real numbers were.
Okay.
But I just think that the one-size-fits-all is going to be a problem for Tampa Bay Water. I don't think it's something that we can't work through. I don't know how we get there, and that's why you're here. But I know that we can't turn a blind eye, keep waiting for something to happen, because we can't wait. And when I have all these senior citizens in Sun City Center that can't get a good flow of water out of their faucet, and the water quality is questionable, you can understand. Put yourself in my shoes. It's exactly what Councilman Miranda said. Put yourself in my shoes when I get the constituent calls every single day. So I want this to work. I was there when it started. I want it to work. I love regional. I think regional transportation, water, it serves a great purpose, but this is, we're in a dilemma.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're good. Board Member Rice.
Thank you. Well, just to level set, we're stating our interest and comments on, the first one was each member government's interest on, I think essentially the interlocal agreement and the Tampa Bay Water as a sole and exclusive provider. And I think, you know, Commissioner Starkey described the formation of Tampa Bay Water as brilliant. Mayor Marlowe said it so eloquently, you know, the importance of regional cooperation. And I think 20 years ago, the creation of Tampa Bay Water showed that cooperation is more effective and more important than competition. In fact, on any kind of big regional, big ticket item that all of us face as public officials, I think we find that cooperation is the new competition. So I mean, yes, I support the, I do not want to see the Tampa Bay Water, the formation, the interlocal agreement, pulled apart. I think it's really important for us to go back and to recognize that when Tampa Bay Water was formed, we're talking about shared risks for shared benefits. Our member governments came to a conclusion after many years of expensive litigation and years of discussion and planning that we determined that our interests were best met through a shared common approach rather than a fractured one. And that's why we decided on a unitary rate. It's why we entered into an agreement for this purpose, to share the risk involved with permitting, co-funding opportunities, capital and operating cost, and that this was better than relying on older and more costly water supplies. So I think it's really important that we keep in mind just how important that shared risk and common benefit is, and how we arrived at that. And furthermore, the benefits that we have gained for the last 20 years through this program, and the fact that we have addressed critical environmental issues with the overpumping of well fields and lakes in Pasco County. Tampa Bay Water has, by and large, solved a lot of those environmental and supply issues that brought us to such a conflict point 20 years ago. So in terms of issues about whether reclaimed water can be used for potable purposes, yes, of course, that's obviously going to be a future technology that perhaps the interlocal agreement didn't anticipate. But of course, it's something that I think it's best addressed as Tampa Bay Water. So if we're looking at these projects under the aegis of Tampa Bay Water, that's one conversation that I think that we're capable of having. If we're talking about reclaimed water used for potable purposes as a member government's own separate self-supply system that would then sell water in this area and compete with what Tampa Bay Water's doing, then I do have issues with that. And I think there's a lot of questions that we've brought up a lot from time to time over the last year and a half, but I guess we're here at this workshop to go through it again. But if we're talking about member governments self-supplying, then there's a lot of questions we have to answer, like, is Tampa Bay Water going to be responsible for providing emergency water when those self-supply systems, for whatever reason, may fail? What are we going to do about debt issues? What are we going to do about governance issues? Should these member governments have representation on the Tampa Bay Water Board? How are we going to continue to fulfill environmental protection, whether it's by aquifer protection or making sure that we're keeping up with the challenges of that sea level rise, climate change brings about, increased contaminants, emerging new contaminants in the water supply? How are we going to make sure that we're addressing these on a consistent and acceptable level? And there's also issues for co-funding with SwiftMud. Is Tampa Bay Water then going to be competing with member governments for co-funding of water supply projects? And a lot of these issues these are board issues. These are policy issues that we need to discuss, and these are questions I think that have been kind of sitting out there for a while that we need to answer. A couple of quick things. I'd like to just to level set and have a quick timeline that maybe we jot down on a piece of paper, but we have Tampa Bay Water has to supply South Hillsborough County with water immediately by 2024, and that's why we've funded the booster station to get that additional water to South Hillsborough. Then we've got to come up with another 10 MGD by 2028, and another 10 MGD beyond that we bring online 2035 or 2040. So to get to those levels, we have we have a configuration of different projects to look at. SHARP will figure prominently in any of those configurations. Let's come back to SHARP in a second. But some of the things that we have on the table, solutions staring us in the face, include, and this is just back of the envelope calculations, but we're looking at surface water expansion, 10 MGD. Expanding SHARP could be another 10 MGD. Optimization, 5 MGD. Reclaimed, 5 to 10 MGD. Conservation, 11 MGD. We have a lot of different ways to bring water online to supply the region without necessarily this need of going to member governments self-supplying and putting Tampa Bay Water at risk. So let's go back to SHARP. SHARP is our way to get 7 MGD right away. So what I hope that we're going to come up with today is an idea of how do we start to formulate, how do we have a framework for the pricing and the credits of reclaimed water for SHARP. And I think one of the things that we need to talk about is the value of those reclaimed credits cannot be overly inflated because we think that there's going to be a lot of value for supply as a potable water source. Are you with me? Does this make sense? We're jacking up the price of the reclaimed water credits for SHARP because we think that there's a higher use for member government supply projects. And that's just going about it the wrong way. We're putting the Tampa Bay Water in jeopardy to allow member governments to potentially self-supply. And I just think that if we had a better idea, a better concept of the timeline and why it's so important today that what we really start to understand the pricing and credit formula for SHARP, because that's the decision that needs to happen to move us forward for immediate needs. And we're getting stuck on, with all due respect, a member government that sees a much higher value for reclaimed water credits than what other member governments are looking at. For a lot of reasons, and I would encourage anybody who didn't watch the utility director's conversation about reclaimed pricing and credits. It was really interesting. There was a lot of nuance, there was a lot of debate. It helped me understand it a lot more. But there's a lot of different ways to value these credits. But it shouldn't come at the expense of member governments that have figured out how to use reclaimed water for conservation and for efficiency.
Okay. All right, I'll go around again. Just raise your hand if you want to add something. See,
Carlos, let me make sure that I captured Councilmember
Go ahead.
Rice's points. That what's important to the city of St. Pete is to maintain a cooperative versus competitive approach to water supply. To continue this concept of shared risk and common benefit. To recognize Tampa Bay Water's achievements, not forget those. It's important to the city of St. Pete that Tampa Bay Water do the reclaimed projects. If member governments and not have member governments develop them in competition. It's important to answer the questions about how it would work if some member governments self-supplied. What would be the implications of that? including for Tampa Bay Water's obligation to meet the needs, issues of environmental protection, and co-funding. And it's important to use the resources that Tampa Bay Water has to meet the needs without jeopardizing Tampa Bay Water. Okay.
Correct.
And help me with this last point about valuing reclaimed water. What's important about the way reclaimed water is valued?
Reclaimed water, I mean, there's a big debate on how we're coming up with the price and the value of the credits. And part of the reason why there's different points of view on that is that different member governments have different histories of operationalizing efficiency and mitigation. So, you know,
So
Pasco County isn't the only member government that has reclaimed water. Pinellas County does. St. Pete certainly does. It's a program we've invested in for years.
Okay, so you want to value it fairly.
It needs to be valued fairly.
Okay.
But a member government that does not practice or require efficiency, water-saving means, Florida-friendly yards, use of purple pipes for reclaimed water. A government that doesn't have as much of a handle on that and may not have much of a handle on growth management. It's not fair to put a higher value for reclaimed water for a member government that wants to say, oh, well, this has a higher value if we create a direct or indirect potable water supply.
Okay.
Okay?
Yes, when Councilmember Miranda was talking earlier, and he said all the water ran off. In actuality, I talked to Chuck before the meeting started. We filled our reservoir, so it didn't all run off.
Well, yeah.
But the fact of it is, it opened my mind to the fact that maybe another future source is another reservoir in the right place, that we capture more than we just do in the one reservoir. So that's another source of water in the future with using the same type system, if that could be possible. So, and probably question would go out to Tampa Bay Water if they feel like that we could keep 2 reservoirs going for the future, and that's another source of water. And then thinking about the pipeline for Hillsborough County and Commissioner Merman talking about the low pressure and all they have in some cities in the lower part of Hillsborough County, maybe that water line, that pipeline that we've all agreed to put in now should have been done 2 years ago instead of now. So we got to all have to think ahead to help our communities. So,
Okay.
and the whole, everybody thinking of it as
Okay.
regional.
Yeah.
So we got to do things in a timely manner to move, because these things don't, when you agree to do them, it takes time to get things done. That's an issue.
And those are really, those are great points. But right now, we're just talking on interests of the parties. And what's difficult with that is some of those are your interests, but some of them are a reaction to the comments. Remember, after we finish this, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back with the reactions to it, and then the brainstorming.
Right.
Just remember that. And
I was just going to say that I think as we, if we move towards counties changing some of their reclaimed water into potable, and I don't think we're there, but I get that there's logistics, because Tampa Bay Water has to have a long view of supply. And so if counties start supplying some of their own, well, we don't want to waste the region's money, Tampa Bay Water, if we invest in something that's expensive and then we don't get to get the maximum benefit out of it. So there are logistics that are complicated. But I feel there's a way to work that out. And yeah, so, that's kind of what I
I
wanted to
think
say.
we're getting into
Yeah.
the next.
The next, and it's a natural. I mean, it's a natural.
It's
You're
natural.
all,
People wanting-
so,
People
yeah.
wanting to react.
So, Chairman?
Yeah, well, to me, this is great conversation. I think we're, as some of us have said, we're just trying to put it out there for conversation. We have a system that has worked for 20 years and has evolved throughout that 20 years. So that's no different. I mean, we're in a different place with different issues today. We should be doing more as Tampa Bay Water. We should be doing more to reach out to our residents that, hey, by the way, in 10 or 20 years, whatever that time frame is, we may be drinking reclaimed water. I don't know that our residents are ready for that. We don't have a water supply issue today, but we may in 10 years or 20 years. So that's a separate thing for a different day. But the comments that Councilmember Rice said about cooperation, to me is just paramount. I mean, to the extent that all we're doing is thinking about ourselves, I think that becomes a problem. So we need to be thinking about how we move forward collectively. And the issues that Pinellas County has with water are on Tampa Bay Water to help resolve, but also for Pinellas County to look in the mirror to make sure we're doing everything we can too. So and all of our member governments need to act that way so that we're not only being critical of our organization around this table, but our own, whether it's water quality issues that Pinellas County might have that are unique to, because we get a lot of well water in Pinellas County, where others may get more river water. And so we all have different issues and different challenges that, Tampa Bay water quality, I've heard that for around the table. That's a big deal for everybody. And that's a big investment for everybody. But it's better that we're all investing together on that issue. So I think there's a lot of good issues here that we've laid out there. I think Councilmember Rice kind of brought us in there, like trying to point out some of the differences that we have. But certainly the public outreach is important, because that's going to be an issue if we're ever going to use reclaimed water as a water source. And then making sure that when we come up with a price or a credit for reclaimed water, that it is thought of much like our water supply, a price that is good regardless of a project specific. It shouldn't be determined based on a project. It should be determined based on a commodity product that's available for water consumption. And so, that's a challenge. I mean, it's a challenge for all of us, and specifically right now, perhaps for Hillsborough County, as they look to add more water supply. But I think it's high time that we look forward to see how we can really work together on this, as opposed to, yeah. And it's symbolic. It's not just Pinellas and St. Pete working on this. I mean, Pasco and Hillsborough disappeared there.
All right.
Come on. Anyway, that was my only comment. Thank you.
Well,
All right.
I just want to clear the air for a little bit. And look, Tampa has a service area. So Tampa can't get any larger than what it is. However, when you look at these things, and I'm listening to everyone's conversation, in fact, we spoke so many things about water that the board fell off.
I think it's taping.
And I look at things in a realistic thing. One day I was driving sometime in March or April, I was driving home from Osmar, and I look up and there's a big sign on the corner of Hillsborough Avenue and Sheldon Road. Tampa Bay Water, the area's largest water supplier.
They're not in order.
I said, that's nice. Why do we advertise? You only got 6 customers. 6 governments. Hillsborough, Pasco, Pinellas, Newport Richey, Tampa, and St. Pete. That's it. So that's just me as chairman of the City Finance Committee. If that was coming to Tampa and advertising water, I'd take it off. I ain't spending money on something that I already got the 6 customers. I don't understand that. You might be changing some mindset somewhere, but that's somebody else's. We have a service area by law. I didn't create it. The city of Tampa didn't create it. Tampa Bay Water didn't create it, by law. And sometimes 35, 40 years ago, when you might have been in office in the legislature, not that you're that old, Ms. Merman, we had a boundary, and then the legislature, if we had a service line close to somewhere in the county, we had to service it by law. And we did that. So we're not going, however, that being said, so we have an advanced population coming in. We're not advertising for the population to move to the city of Tampa. No one is. They're coming here because of what? It ain't because of me. They're coming in because you have what? Sunshine, and in the winter, they want to move down to Florida because they think it's a place to be, and rightly so. So when they come down here and they move into the city of Tampa, Hillsborough County, Pinellas, Pasco, Newport, Richie, wherever, the population increases. So just think if you're in these shoes, what happens? You can only produce 82 million gallons of water a day by law, on average, but your population keeps increasing. So even in your service area, which by law is your right, you can't service it. What a nice country. So if Tampa was allowed, notice the word if again, to do something to service their area, the investment that you would have to do outside of the area, and you're going to be in the same shoes that Tampa is very, very shortly. All of you are, and God bless you. I had hair one time, and you caught too many footballs, and I got beat in the head too many times. So that's what happens in life. What comes around goes around, and you got to be expecting it. We're expecting it, we've got it, and it's a wonderful thing to have. But it's a very difficult thing to control. So what we're experiencing now in Hillsborough and Tampa, and Pasco's having it, Newport Richie's having it, you're going to be surprised what you're going to get. Because if you think you got people calling you now, what until that population hits and you're putting something in a close box and the people feel like they're getting suffocated? You're going to get calls. You're going to get many calls. And you can't stop it. No one can. Because the people in America have the right to live wherever they want. So these are the things that we're going to have to face, whoever services the area. But when you have a God-given right that was by law given to you, then you're supposed to supply it.
Okay. All right. On that, let's go ahead and take a break. We're going to, we'll now continue the discussion where everybody can comment on it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we understand that there's some time limitations, and Commissioner Merman has to leave at noon, so we're trying to speed up matters. Annalee was just talking to me about maybe just having a discussion now, so everybody understands some of the entries that were put up on the board. Having a discussion of that and leaving the brainstorming for the meeting that we're going to have basically a month from now, so that everybody can go back to their, with their utility directors and other personnel that you have and get a reaction of ideas to put forth. And we start off the next meeting with brainstorming, with you all having the ability to think about what was being said today and ideas to bridge that gap. Mr. Chairman, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we've kind of gone through already. Mm-hmm. Have continued discussion, kind of maybe just have some more dialogue among members. And then I think a couple of people have said, and I certainly share that our utility directors are critical in this whole discussion. To go back and kind of circle back with them and then come here ready with some constructive ideas for brainstorming, I think it's a great idea.
Okay.
And then we're not trying to cram too much in.
Exactly.
And at the same time,
It
not
would be
giving
rushed and we would not get the full
and not giving
benefit.
opportunity for each of us to talk to utility directors, because building another reservoir, for instance, for reclaimed water. I mean, it's like, wow, that sounded
Right.
like a pretty decent idea. It may not be realistic, it may be too expensive, blah, blah, blah. So I think those are things that we can start to talk to utility directors about when we come back.
But I would urge you not to hear it's too expensive.
No, I understand.
not a
I
good
got you.
idea.
I got you.
We want every idea that
Yeah,
you can
I
come
got
up
you.
with, and don't censor.
I think it's a good point. It's a good point. So
Okay,
go ahead.
So let's just have a discussion, just kind of reactions regarding as to what, we'll do that.
If Commissioner Merman has to leave, why don't we put lunch last and do everything and just put lunch last, and we can just take it and go and not stay here and then come back to have a conversation again.
Say, I, for some reason, it's echoing or something, I'm not hearing it. Go
I
ahead.
said, since Commissioner Merman has to leave early, why don't we just skip the lunch, and we'll do that last. So you do your next step, do everything, and just push lunch back, so that way she doesn't miss anything.
I agree.
That's what we're doing.
And that's what I was thinking too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that helps. Yeah, oh, yeah, we are. I think that's the idea, that it's,
Okay. Well, who wants to go with the idea of leaving brainstorming, just by a show of hands real quick, brainstorming until you meet with the utility directors?
hey,
and
I
do
tell you
the
what, why
first
don't we
meeting?
do this? Why don't we just go into the discussion phase right now and see how that evolves?
Okay.
And then, when we get finished with that, see what time frame we have. We
Okay.
can even start the next meeting, we can finish with some brainstorming today, but start the next meeting with some additional, let's just see how it goes.
That's fine.
And we may have time and we may not have time to get that part going. I mean, let's just play it by ear here. I think we need to see how things develop and not preconceive. So let's just go ahead, first things, and go ahead.
Yeah, we had kind of started some of the discussion. I think people were anxious to go ahead and jump in and respond to some of the things that they heard. And I just want to make sure that we understand Commissioner Starkey's point. And let me try, and you can tell me if I got it right. I heard you say, first of all, that you like the idea that's in the interlocal agreement that member governments have control over their reclaimed water. But I understood you to say that the logistics of all that are kind of complicated, and Tampa Bay Water has the obligation to plan for the future and provide for adequate supplies. And if the member governments are developing their own projects, reclaimed water for water supply, that makes it very difficult for Tampa Bay Water to do its job.
Yeah, exactly. So there needs to be some kind of formula or plan that ensures that the stability of Tampa Bay Water stays in place while this other source comes online. And so there's some kind of matrix or something that ensures that we're not undercutting our own regional organization. So,
So it's similar, actually, to Councilmember Rice's point, that we need to understand the implications if
Yes.
people are going to start doing self-supply.
Yes.
What does that mean in terms of Tampa Bay Water's obligation to meet member needs? What does it mean in terms of cost and rates that the
Capital
folks who are not
projects.
self-supplying are going to pay? What does it mean in terms of co-funding that's available to Tampa Bay Water and others? There are lots of questions that have to be answered if that's the path we're going to take.
because I don't see any way that we can go back to how it was before we had Tampa Bay Water. That is a non-starter for me.
No.
And so we have to have this regional organization. So how do we have the two coexist? That's the devil in the detail.
The two what coexist?
Well, if we're
Exactly.
if we're cleaning some of our reclaimed water, I can't see it ever equaling what we get from Tampa Bay Water, but it will have, some impact on future supply. And so we have to be very careful that we don't get our regional partners or our own county in a pickle if Tampa Bay Water hasn't been able to pinpoint what our needs are in the future because they were told, well, we don't need as much to go to Pasco County because we're doing this with our reclaimed water, and then it doesn't happen. And you know how long it takes sometimes for us to find new water sources. So that is a challenge that we will need to deal with. But, it's not a wall, it's a bump. That's what I say.
So it may be a manageable issue, but it's a serious one.
Yes.
I think we need to consider something very important. I do know that legislatively, there is a group of legislators who want to get control over this issue with reclaim. And I don't think it will, I'm not sure of the direction they're going, but if it's what I have heard and have talked to them about, it's Tampa Bay Water and Reclaimed Reclaim's going to be up to local governments, and Tampa Bay Water will not be involved in it. And if that's the case, then how do we react? And what do we do? Because I do know specifically some people that are very interested in this topic that want to see reclaim worked out from a state level perspective, not from this regionally.
But Commissioner Merman, I would say that they also don't want to see Tampa Bay Water go away.
Correct. I don't want to see Tampa Bay Water go away, but I think that this issue reclaimed is, and it's never actually been an issue that Tampa Bay Water has owned, because we own our reclaimed water, our individual governments. So I guess what I'm saying is, there could be legislation that takes us in a different direction.
And you're talking legislators statewide?
Yes.
Not talking local legislators?
Well, no.
There may be some,
Yeah,
but this is a
the
movement
legislators
statewide.
from our region that are interested in the topic.
So was there not some legislation passed in the last session to create
That was the
different
first step.
rules?
That was the first step.
Okay, so there is something happening at the state level with reclaimed water.
Yeah, but specifically, again, to your point earlier, let's be specific. I mean, they're interested in reclaimed water, inalienable rights of the producing entity, their right to utilize it for whatever they want to use it for themselves. Again, that doesn't necessarily, they're not necessarily in conflict with Tampa Bay Water at that point. Are you going to use it to sell to Polk County Water?
That's what I was gonna say.
Are you going to use it to, what is specifically are these legislators hearing from you all or from any other local group that is getting their attention? I mean, what is it? I mean,
Are you saying that I'm lobbying them to do something?
Absolutely.
Oh,
I don't mean you personally. I'm saying that there's
No, you just said personally.
Okay.
No, he didn't mean
No,
that.
I did mean you. I'm saying Hillsborough County, Tampa, we know we're talking to our legislators last year, the year before about this effort. And that's that's okay. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying.
I'm not lobbying anybody.
What is it?
They've come to me.
What is it specifically that benefits you from you? We use it. We use it for reclaimed water, or excuse me, irrigation. So you can use yours for what you want to use it. That's not in conflict with Tampa Bay Water. What is it specifically you're wanting to do with the water that perhaps does create a conflict? That's what I'm trying to understand. If it's to use for irrigation,
Potable.
cool.
It's for potable.
If it's for potable water for your own use, that's something that we can talk about. I mean, like you said, you own your reclaimed water. We just have to figure out how it's going to work within our system so that we protect the capital
But the
investments that we're
state
having.
may tell us how it's going to work.
Well, they're going to tell us if we're not together and telling them how we want to do it.
No,
So
I think,
Oh, okay.
okay.
All right. So,
I understand. I think they're heading in a different direction than we are.
well, they're concerned about water availability for the state of Florida. I get that. That's their job. They need to worry about that. We can be leaders in this state of Florida if we come up with solutions that are viable, that make sense for the existence of an infrastructure like Tampa Bay Water to continue to flourish, while at the same time providing flexibility within our member governments. It's very possible. But that's why I think I think there's a lot of people looking to how we deal with it here responsibly. I mean,
What you're saying is that it's an interest really for Tampa Bay to speak in one voice regarding this issue.
Yeah.
That's an interest you would put forward.
Yeah.
That's an
I mean,
important interest.
I would hope
Yeah.
that
I
we're,
mean, I think that was Commissioner Starkey's point.
Yeah,
It's an issue, but it's a manageable issue.
So one of the ideas is that, well, let me back up a little bit. I think one of the reasons why my utility department is paying attention to this is because it can be a revenue source for Pasco County utilities. And so, but if we're selling our water to Tampa Bay Water at a very competitive price, I think everyone wins. The county gets to realize income, and because our utilities department is an enterprise, and we want to keep our rates as low as possible for our citizens, as I think we all do as commissioners. And is it a more effective water source for Tampa Bay Water than to spend a lot of money building another RO plant, an enclosure? So I don't see why the two can't coexist if we do it that way. And so then we're not in competition with Tampa Bay Water, but we're in a partnership with Tampa Bay Water.
I think particularly if we consider something that Council Miranda talked about, which was the stormwater, which quite frankly I had not given a lot of thought to, but I mean, as recently as the last 30 days, we've gone out to spend an enormous amount of money to take water that not only is being generated within the city limits of Newport Richey, but also in Pasco County, and trying to get it out of neighborhoods because it's causing flooding issues, and we're dumping it into the river. I mean, if we thought in larger terms of that, taking stormwater, figuring places where we could store it when there's an overabundance of it, and then ship that and potentially the reclaimed water to a central facility where it could be converted into potable water. That's a win-win all the way around. And I don't want to put words in the mouth of my colleagues from Pasco County, but I think we would be open to having that done as something that we sell it to Tampa Bay Water at some sort of reasonable price, and they take it and they make it potable, and then sell it back to us at the standard rate. I don't think I'd have any problem with that at all. And it gives us that additional source of water that we are going to need. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but 10, 20 years down the pipe, we're going to need to be looking at a lot of water, because I see what's happening in central Pasco, and that area is exploding population-wise. Newport Richey, we're much like St. Petersburg and Tampa, we're constrained geographically, but we're going up. So, that need is going to be there, and I think as a group, we start looking at some of these out-of-the-box solutions, such as the stormwater, and figuring out how we can best do reclaimed water. If we can get our hands and heads around that, and come to an agreement that works for all 6 member governments, we can, with a united voice, go to the legislature and say, look, this is what we're doing. If you want to come up with a model that works for the state of Florida, look at Tampa Bay Water. Look at what we're doing as 6 cooperating governments.
Okay, good point.
With divergent interests.
Yeah.
We're not always on the same page at the same time, but we're trying to.
I think that's why the rate is so important on the credits and all that, because a lot of citizens feel like they've already paid for this water once, and they don't want to pay for it again.
Yeah, there should be, there's got to be a reasonable rate that's paid for this water going back to Tampa Bay Water. What that number is, I think, is something that we need to work our way through, have our utility directors work their way through.
Yeah. One of the things I do want to tell you is Mike Burton, who's back there, that you've picked the absolute right person to do that analysis for you. I have never been as impressed with somebody with expertise. The job that he did on the Taylor Creek Reservoir for the city of Orlando, Orange County. I've talked to you some about that. There was basically 5 water authorities and the St. John's Water Management District. The only person that they all trusted to come up with the right solutions for them in a very complicated situation as far as pricing, and that all of them agreed that what he would come up with, they could rely on, and did. It ended up creating a situation where they could share that one source. Very complicated, and obviously, I think this is what you're finding out. The more you get into the weeds of reclaimed water, some people have already done some projects may be in the works, some projects may have an impact on capital resources already spent, and how that is allocated. It becomes difficult, but I believe it's doable, and if it is at all doable, you do have the right person, if I may add. I'm not associated with Mike in any other way, but you have the right people looking at it. He's got the trust of a lot of water authorities.
And again, I think I appreciate those comments, and it would seem if you look at like almost two extremes, if you charge 0 for reclaimed and minimize the expense to the system and minimize in return the consumers, the individual government's use, that has a value. And then if you go way expensive that helps that member government in giving its product, it actually becomes a higher cost of goods to create the water. So there's got to be somewhere in between where it kind of makes sense for any projects that we do, whether it's, St. Pete comes up with a project, Pasco, Hillsborough, they come up with a project so that water is used internally. I mean, we're not creating water to sell, but to use ourselves. So, I mean, there's got to be a place in there where it does make some sense between way too much and there's a value to that. It's a commodity, for crying out loud. So we,
Yeah, and I think there is a recognition in that group where Mike is your consultant, that the priority is meeting Hillsborough's needs. That's the most immediate issue. So trying to get a handle on what's a reasonable price, a fair price for Sharp is kind of at the top of their list to come up with. And they're going to be talking to you at your October board meeting.
yeah, and I think that's a good thing, because we're going to be, right now we're looking at those 3 water projects, right? The Sharp project, the expanding desal, expanding our river source. So it'd be nice to, I mean, if we could accelerate that process, I mean, it'd be ideal so that we can get a parallel project going along with this pipeline, because obviously getting you guys water in South County sooner, as soon as possible, whether it's booster station to provide more pressure, another booster station to provide more pressure, and then a pipeline to get the product there, is super critical. I mean,
Well, 2024 is too late, I'll be honest with you. And that's why we're having to build another pipeline. And we just had to increase our rates. So I'm like, I don't think anybody in here is going through what we're going through. And I don't know how else to explain it when a senior citizen in Sun City can't get a flow of water during the day. I can't, I don't know how else to, except to just break down in tears and tell you how bad it is and how important it is. But it's 20, you're right, 2 years ago, and all you who are on the board remember I started bringing this up 5 years ago. So it's just too important to the quality of life of our citizens. And regardless of the growth issues or whatever, because all these developments that are going up down there, they were approved back in 2005, okay? And PD's approved. You all know we go through that process. We're having to live with that and what the legislature did in 2011 to not pay for our infrastructure. So I'm just saying that we're stuck with a lot of these unfunded mandates, and now we've got a terrible crisis with COVID and how it's affecting, each one of you know how it's affecting our budgets. And it's not this year, it's how it's going to affect the next 2 budget years after this one. So I'm just trying to make it a real situation to you all. And the dispute on the rate just exacerbated the issue. I mean, we just need to move forward. And I do feel this, and it's not up on the charts, I do think reclaimed water is going to increase in value a lot over the years, especially as technology improves and the water quality for reclaim gets so good, you know, better than what's in here. So, you know, that's just, I just want y'all to know. I mean, this is heartfelt. I'm not doing it because I'm, for any other reason, I'm not against Tampa Bay Water. I love Tampa Bay Water. I think they're doing a great job, but they gotta, somebody's gotta wake up.
Okay, any further discussions?
I do have empathy for the situation that you're in. I would not want to take calls like that either, and I understand it's serious.
Before you go, Commissioner Merman, your belief that the value of reclaimed water will increase in the future, is that a demand-supply issue that you?
I think as the technology improves and the quality of it improves, yes, it will be in more demand.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify.
The situation of growth in Hillsborough County, it you know, it happened by design as well, and you know, the neighborhoods didn't build themselves. And I know that there's a lot of talk here. I think you mentioned earlier that Hillsborough County hasn't raised its rate in 20 years. I know Tampa Bay Water is very proud of not raising its rates in 10 years. But the flip side of never raising rates is that you have an infrastructure that's hard to be proud of. And St. Pete's gone through that. If ever there was a cautionary tale I could share with you from my own experience. I mean, St. Petersburg has had to phase in raised rates to help pay for all aspects of our infrastructure, fixing I&I, expanding our water treatment plants capacity. And I mean, just at a certain point, you've got to, you know, raise rates. At least, you know, it's got to be a way for helping to raise bonds and borrow to help pay for, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars of infrastructure improvements and expansion. But, you know, where I'd like to kind of even out the conversation is in a county like Hillsborough County that hasn't required purple pipes to go in, even when all of the new stuff is being built and there's an opportunity to do so. It just seems, it creates an uneven field where Hillsborough County hasn't invested in purple pipes, but Pasco and Pinellas and St. Pete have. And the lack of that efficiency, the lack of those water conservation is creating part of the problem, and it's also ironically creating a greater value in the reclaimed credits. So it needs to level set at some point where Pasco or St. Pete, Pinellas aren't punished because we did invest in reclaim programs all along the way. Now, do we need more?
I have to say, I don't have an answer, and that's the first time I've heard that.
Commissioner, can you put your mic on?
I have not, this is the first time I've heard that, so I'd have to, I'm just texted my utility director and said, oh my gosh, is that true? And because I know in the city of Tampa, they definitely use purple pipes. I have them at my house, so I know that's true. I just not sure about the county. And I would imagine, because George used to work in the city of St. Pete, that, you know, there'd probably be some connection there, so I'll have to verify that.
Well, I think the point is an important one, and that is, okay, we're going to start now, but the playing field at this point isn't level in terms of what people have done up to this point. And is there a way to give credit to forward-looking actions that have been taken by some jurisdictions and perhaps not others to make sure that what we're doing here is fair? That's, I think, the point you're making. And that did come up in the workshop having to do with reclaimed pricing. And one complicated way is to go back in history and figure out what credits different governments are entitled to because of investments they've made in the past. And people said, oh my God, you know, it gets very complicated, but there may be some sort of surrogate measures that Mike Burton and his folks can come up with that would take that into account. It's kind of similar to that issue about pandemic relief for state and local governments, you know, that some people say, well, I don't think we should reward bad behavior or bad financial management on the part of some states, and it's kind of similar to that. It's not, we want to make sure we're being fair.
Yeah. And I just want to add, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, I apologize.
I was just going to say the issue that South Hillsborough is facing right now is one that Pasco County is going to be facing sooner rather than later. One of the commissioners could probably tell you how many tens of thousands of new homes are already on the books that haven't been built yet, but they're coming, and they're going to come fast. When we have our next workshop, which will be up in Pasco County, I would encourage you, drive around a little bit on either side of wherever it is we have that meeting, because 5-10 years ago, most of the area was cow pasture and farmland, and it's not anymore, and that's rapidly changing even more so. It's the growth, particularly in central Pasco along the State Road 54-56 corridor, is almost scary how much is being built. And there are plans now that extend those developments all the way up to State Road 52. And as you start looking at that, we're going to be in the same boat that South Hillsborough's in, and it's going to be sooner rather than later that happens.
Well, I would say, and I'm looking here for specific numbers, that we've been continually raising our rates to make sure that we are putting in the infrastructure to stay in front of that, not behind it. So those weren't always fun votes, but we have to have the infrastructure. We also are very aggressive on the purple pipes. We do require those, and so Yeah, I think as a percentage of total, we're growing faster than Hillsborough. And so we are hopefully taking steps that make sure we don't have a low flow situation. And we've put in 2 reclaimed water reservoirs in the last, 5 years, 10 years? 5, yeah. One of which we ended up having to pay for a lot more by ourselves than we had planned on. That's a Swift Mud issue.
And those
May I jump on that?
Those reclaimed water reservoirs are used for any purpose, or?
Well, we store it, and then we send it out when we have routes to people, golf courses.
Irrigation.
And irrigation.
Sir, can I just jump in real quick? But that's a really good point. And so whenever we're talking about any potential scenario where a member government is going to self-supply, and then I would guess maybe that questions whether or not Tampa Bay Water still has an obligation to back up a member government with emergency supply of water. But if something happens with a project where the costs go up and then those costs exceed the level at which Tampa Bay Water can supply the water in the first place, then what benefit was obtained?
So
It
there
just
you're
seems like
concerned
we're
about-
better off doing this together as a collective. I'm just not seeing the benefits add up for member government self-supply. And so many projects Tampa Bay Water has taken on has always ended up being more expensive than what we thought it would be.
Well, I tell you, just listening, I seem to go in different directions in my thoughts, because this is, obviously really super complicated. In Pinellas County, we have 2 reclaim systems. We have one for South County, one for North County. In North County, we seldom have extra. South County, we have extra. We're trying to figure out how to get that stuff up there. We even looked at a utility, Duke Energy line, maybe use that to transport stuff, just so that we could make sure that we were dumping less. Not dumping, but you know what I mean, putting it out into the.
Yeah.
Everybody has their challenges, and so we're working at it differently. We do have some little bit of growth vertically, not as much as you guys do. So I think that I think there's ways that this whole discussion about water consumption and where it comes from, and do we self-supply, do we sell separately? It all comes down to paying for the system. So right now, your growth in Pasco, and you guys are using more water and paying for the infrastructure that's in place now, more so. Your rates, your costs are going up. But we're talking about looking forward to new capital investments, and so we got to make sure that those are protected, that we're providing multiple sources of water, not just river water, not just, salt water, not just well water, but all 3. It's a more expensive system to have multiple sources of water available. It's an insurance policy. That was one of the big, we talked about the beautiful nature of this organization. It was to provide that drought-proof backup. And then we have the reservoir that was added. And, so we're all investing in this together. And however we've done up to now, some have been more aggressive with A or B. I think we can still. I think there's a solution right here, if we talk through it. Just because you guys want to use reclaimed water for potable doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow. You guys haven't convinced your own residents to drink it. We haven't. So that's another issue. That may be 10 to 15 years away. Who knows? But we can still deal with, water shortages or, growth in water in South County or in Pasco County that has nothing to do with using reclaimed water, other than the fact that a lot of people use it already for irrigation, and therefore it reduces the demand on water. So, I mean, those are, again, I think we can, and there's ways to deal with this thing. And if it's, help, getting SwiftMud involved with co-funding on different projects, I mean, that's what a regional water supply has the ability to do, so that we can share in that expense. I mean, I just think there's ways to do it if you really, again, I get back to the very first thing that I said. If you want to work together in this region, we can do it. And then we start from there moving forward and find solutions. We got a lot of smart people that are sitting back here, or they're maybe not here today, but our utility folks are pretty smart people, and they each have finance people that are pretty smart people. So I think we've got the wherewithal to do it, but we just got to know that we're all working together on this, and that there is a solution for it. Why pay for your own water plant when we can provide you water, and we have multiple sources to provide you protection on that water, and we can go back and find out when we were saying we're going to have water shortages, and how those demand forecasts over the next 5 years, and that's the last 5 years, have changed. They've been higher in a couple of those years at Tampa Bay Water for South County of Hillsborough than South County predicted for themselves. And that's changed back and forth because it's a tough one to measure. It's a tough one to predict. But again, I think we're kind of in this together, not, again, cooperation and not competition. I think we got the talent, we've got funding, we've got abilities, just have to have the willpower and the interest. For me, it can be as simple as that and as complicated as that. I mean, it's both. I know, I'm not trying to put my head in the sand and say it's simple, but there's solutions right here to be had if you want to work to make them happen. And it's negotiations, it's having, like the gentleman in the back who's, work with us to figure out what that's worth, that reclaimed.
Right.
So, anyway.
You probably made him very nervous today.
Yeah, I know.
Just sort of
Expectations
put the whole
have
thing
gone,
on his
yeah,
shoulders.
gone
Gone
through the
beyond
roof
the
now.
Anyone else?
Well, I was going to say, kind of in reaction to what Commissioner Eggers was just saying, I kind of feel that if, say, for example, our county is viewing our reclaimed water as a revenue source because we've put a lot of investment into it, our county, not anyone else, us. I think as kind of a standalone business, we should take the risk as well. So I'm okay with taking that risk. I think our county is. So I don't think it's necessary to share that risk with everybody when it's our enterprise and our investment. Mm-hmm. But I'm just one commissioner. I look forward to when we do this and we have utility directors involved, because they know a lot more than me. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. At the next meeting, I hope they're there.
Well, I think I'm going to say something. I think there is value to doing what we're doing today. I'm sorry. This is a really good conversation that we're having as board members that represent our commissions. And those folks are having their conversations, those utility folks, our utility folks are having their conversations, probably a lot deeper and with more technical expertise than we're bringing to the table. And I think there will be a time, and maybe it's the next meeting, maybe that's what we need to talk about before we wrap up here, that sitting around this table with us are utility directors so that we can have them at the table. But I think there's value in what we're doing. I mean, again, I'm not going to second guess what we've done. I think this is good stuff. And the next step can be that utility director conversation. And in the meantime, between now and then, we can kind of brainstorm within our own organizations, bring that to the table, and they can be a part of the conversation. To me, it makes total sense. I'm not...
I just want to clarify, Commissioner Starkey, you were saying you're willing to take the risk if that project fails. You're not going to be looking to Tampa Bay Water to bail you out. Is that what risk you're talking about?
We're working on a reclaimed water project in the county. Then that's on us. just as another new source of water. And, for example, we had to use sinkholes under our reservoir, and it cost us more. That was between us and Swift Mud and our governing board. Yeah, I'm okay with it.
Well, I'm not clear, is that a potable, no, is that a potable water, or?
Commissioner Eggers was saying and Darden, that, we took that loss or that heavy financial hit ourselves, but if it was a Tampa Bay Water reclaimed reservoir, that risk would have been shared by everybody. True, but that's our enterprise, that's our business, and so we're okay with, like, when you're in business, there's a risk. And I think, like I said, I'm not speaking for my whole county, for my utility director, but I feel that for me, that's part of being in business, is you take a risk. And that's a business.
Okay. And in that case, you were thinking about if there were a cost overrun, like Councilmember Rice was saying, what if the project ends up costing a lot more?
It's kind of a,
I still think it would be my preference to defer the brainstorming to the next meeting. We can grab our lunches, continue the conversation, or maybe we have a few individual conversations, or 2 or 3 people get together and continue the conversation, however you would like to do it. But we only have about 40 minutes, and I'm afraid that the brainstorming plus the wrap-up that we want to do is going to be rushed.
Yeah, and maybe the brainstorming with our utility directors. I'm not saying that some of us haven't already had some of that going on, but maybe that will bring a little bit more reality to our conversation. And the third workshop at the end of this month, or the end of, I guess, next month, October, which is just
Within the month.
Yeah, within a day or two would be this month. So I think that would be probably a healthy discussion. But I'm just, I'm hearing a lot of us say that, probably would be valuable to have our utility director at the table with us at the next workshop. I heard you say that, Commissioner Merman. Yeah. I hear you, but we didn't. So, it's let's.
I know. It's just kind of like getting the pipeline built, South County.
Yeah, and so, again, trying to figure out where we going forward in a constructive manner, I think is really helpful. I'm not hearing anything to the contrary, so we would invite each of our 6 utility directors to be a part of this workshop on, I think it's October 26th, and for that up in Pasco County, where the brainstorming will really take place, right? Yeah, and not the barnstorming, Ron, the brainstorming. But yeah, I think that will be a great place. And then again, I don't know, I don't want to have any preconceived how we're going to end up that meeting, but I think we could have that brainstorming, and then as that meeting evolves, figure out what that next step is. And you guys obviously will be thinking about that in the meantime as well.
yeah.
Okay, let me just, in anticipation of that, look at worksheet 2, so you know what we're going to be doing when we brainstorm. And I think the main point about the brainstorming exercise is we don't evaluate or comment on any ideas as we're generating them. It's only after we have the list that we can then say, that ain't gonna work, okay? So I just wanna make sure to reiterate that I don't want you to censor any ideas that come up in your conversations between now and October 26th. Bring them in, let's get them up on a flip chart page, and then, once we've done that, then we can evaluate, okay? And as Carlos said earlier, silly ideas, crazy ideas, all are welcome.
And when you're doing that, remember the SWOT analysis that we did, the strengths and weaknesses, that analysis. Take a look at that, because I think that's helpful in you being able to say, you know, this idea really plays to our strength, or that idea really plays to our weakness and it could be dangerous. Or so look at that. I mean, that SWOT analysis is kind of giving you a picture of Tampa Bay Water now, right? It's giving you a picture of what does Tampa Bay Water looks like now, but it's extremely helpful as you move forward to look at those, and you can bring them into the conversation as we start talking about these potential potential ways to deal with it. So I would add that. So look at that SWOT analysis. And the other thing I would add, and this goes back to a law partner of mine way back, and some of you may know him, I won't mention his name, but he used to say that some people are spring-loaded in the no position. And basically, no matter what you said, they were spring-loaded in the no position or the yes position. And this is where we ask you to keep an open mind. And even though you may not want a particular approach, think of every possible way the approach that is being considered by the group as a whole could work. It may at the end not work, but don't spring-load yourself into a no or a yes position. Just be open to it, because that becomes essential when we have our next meeting.
So let's go ahead and get lunch, and once everybody's kind of had a chance to stretch your legs, get your lunch, we will do the concluding part.
I do have a quick question, Chair.
Go ahead.
If the brainstorming session, we're going to defer to October 26th, and we'll have the utility directors there. We do have a board meeting the week before on October 19th, and I thought at the board meeting we were supposed to make a decision somehow about the reclaimed water credits. But in order to have that discussion, no? Okay.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, obviously.
I thought we were supposed to have the discussions about the reclaimed pricing and credit issues presented to us at the board meeting for us to talk about, yet for us to have that conversation on the 19th,
Yeah, which one comes first, the chicken or the...
It seems like it's inverted. It seems like we should have that workshop first before we have the board meeting to discuss it.
Ken, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, what do you...
We need for you to find a microphone, though. Can you, Commissioner Starkey, can he share your microphone?
We have a handheld. Annalee, we have a handheld.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, we were planning to bring an item to the October board meeting and have a discussion. We were going to have Mr. Burton there just to initially just lay out the process that we've been going through, and then what are some of the key board policy questions that we need answers or that we would be asking for board direction on. So that was all coming up, and but we haven't at this point decided, whether we would ask the board for a specific direction at that meeting. I think we were kind of waiting to see how this workshop would move forward. But that's something that I think the initial policy question that we were looking at would be whether we should focus the process right now on developing a pricing approach for the SHARP project, as has been talked about earlier, or do we move forward with a more universal or global approach that could be applied to any reuse project? So we wanted to talk about the schedule because you know, we really need to have that sharp pricing worked through by June of next year. That would give us another 6 months to enter into an agreement with Hillsborough County so that we could have that pricing established before we finish our feasibility study for the Sharp project and be able to compare it with the other alternatives, the seawater expansion and surface water expansion. So we were going to present that as the first real policy direction we needed from the board is, do we focus it, do we do it in a phased approach where we would initially, let's deal with Sharp and get a pricing established for that, and then we could then focus on other potential reuse projects, a methodology that would apply for those.
Ken, I mean, from my perspective, it would be, again, I think it'll be really a good discussion to find out where we are. It'll be based on input from our utility directors on some of the thoughts that are coming forward. I would say that for us to give any policy direction in terms of specificity, that would be way too soon. I mean, in my mind, if this is the first time we're looking at it, I think that would be a great way to have that kind of presentation, kind of like for discussion, but to segue into that next board meeting with that information in hand brings, again, a little bit more reality to the conversation at the 26th workshop, which, again, I would say, you know, in December, we'll have it back on the agenda again. And maybe we can go a little bit, I don't want to say full circle, but maybe we'll have had that input, more discussion at the utility director meeting, and then come back again for, I think it can, so we won't be hearing it for the first time. I think it might be helpful. Is it?
And just, I want to say I'm going to be returning from a wedding in North Carolina that morning, and it's sketchy when you're in the mountains if you have cell service to participate by Zoom or whatever it is that we do. So, yeah, I may not be at that meeting. Just depends how fast I get off the mountains, out of the mountains. The next one. No, the next.
October 19th.
October 19th, yeah.
You're talking about the commission, you're talking about the board meeting.
Yeah, I'm talking about the board meeting. I'll be at the workshop.
But your utility director will be there? And Ron,
Well,
will you?
Oh, yeah,
Apparently,
At
I
the
didn't have my
19th?
mic on, so they didn't hear, but
And were you talking about the 19th? Or?
I'll be at the 26th.
So I guess that's probably another good question. I mean, I asked Commissioner Merman earlier, but are the rest of you still available for the 26th?
I am, and I'm just thinking for the ease of everybody's time, why can't we have a abbreviated board meeting on the 26th for essential business that has to be approved? The board meeting's on the 19th.
Correct.
The workshop's on the 26th.
Which one do you want to be abbreviated?
The 19th. And then just combine it in the 26th and just do things that have to be approved. You know, you can always defer presentations on things, but I'm just trying to think if we can consolidate, it'd be better.
Well, again, it just comes really down to everybody's time here. So getting 4 hours of all of our time is difficult because we all have schedules. Heck, some of you are running for office right now, and it's extremely complicated times for everybody. So I don't want to presuppose a whole lot more than 4 hours. This is, you know, so if we're going to have an abbreviated board meeting to discuss, I'm not sure. Commissioner Merman, were you talking about in addition to the 19th? Whatever we do?
Eliminate the 19th and just carve out what, you know,
Well, again,
a half hour of essential business that has to be approved on the 26th. Because, I mean, you've got 7 days where you're going to be in a workshop for 4 hours and a board meeting for 3 hours. And I'm just like thinking, that's a lot of time.
It is, and we've tried to plan this out over the last 2 or 3 months, so.
Right.
I don't want to start getting into the Thanksgiving and Christmas, or the holiday season, so I think we need to do it then. And I just look at staff, I haven't seen any proposed agenda yet for, I mean, you guys are still developing that. So if you could maybe come up and comment as to what we're expecting to accomplish from a board meeting perspective, that would be helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and board members. And we are currently putting together the agenda for October. I don't anticipate a large agenda, as Mr. Hurd said. One of the main items we were going to talk about is get the board an update on where we are with the reclaim discussion credits with your utility directors and Mr. Burton, and just to hear some board feedback. And then we'll take that feedback for continued discussion. I don't have all the specifics right now on the board meeting, but again, I don't, if either of you officers know of anything you've got coming up that...
What about the water permit issue? Is that coming up for
That
this?
is going to be at the meeting, and we need to have that. It does need to be approved by the board, and there's probably some other things that need board approval. They very likely could be on consent. That one would be a presentation, but right now we anticipate having an October board meeting, but I don't anticipate a real long meeting. Again, the permit and the reclaim credits are probably two of the main presentations that we need and would like to have.
Including the reclaimed presentation, is an hour and a half or 2 hours, is an hour and a half, 2 hours?
I think probably within 2 hours, I would suspect, could be. And if we started to run long, we could look at anything that we could defer.
Okay.
But I think that based on what I know right now, and I'll ask the officer sitting here, do you know of anything that beyond those two that might extend the board meeting beyond probably a 2 hour time frame?
Well, extend it. I'm going to further the conversation I had with the executive committee on the ESAL operations.
Right, just an update on that.
Right.
And that's just a preview of what's going to be coming up in December, which will be the main topic, but that's probably a 15-minute presentation, Mr. Carden?
Should be less, I would hope.
Okay. So I think those are the main things. I think we'll be in good shape for a couple hours.
I know, a couple hours to you. You know, there are several of us that have a lot on our plate right now, so I was just trying to consolidate to help all those of us that have a lot going on right now.
Yes, ma'am. And the consolidation you mean by having not having a board meeting and just a workshop?
No.
Okay. About having abbreviated.
Yeah, basically at the 26th meeting, having a shorter, time-constrained meeting, and then going into our workshop. But again, I don't want to shortchange the workshop. That's my, again, because we start to get about 3 or 4 hours, and I start to see people getting itchy, So we have a 4-hour window for a reason for the 26th. I'm just
That is my concern. I'm protective.
Yeah, no.
Of the time that we have with you.
Yeah.
I want to use it as effectively as possible. If I lose energy from doing a regular board meeting at the front end, then that gives us less to work with, what we have to work with.
When we started this meeting today, I did not know whether the governor was going to extend virtual meetings or not. Has anybody heard that? Anybody?
I heard he's not going to extend.
He is not going to extend.
But
So that
you'll
all of
know
our...
at midnight tonight.
Yeah, and he does do things at the last minute sometimes. So with that said, I think we need to protect our 4 hours. So you'd be effectively starting a meeting at 10 o'clock to end at 2 o'clock. I mean, again, I'm just trying to see how, then we'd have if we started at 8:30, we'd have an hour and a half board meeting. Hour and a half board meeting. So that we could start at 10 o'clock and preserve our 4-hour workshop to 10 to 2 o'clock. So essentially what we'd be doing is starting our meeting at 8:30 and going to 2 o'clock, which would include a hour and a half board meeting and then our workshop. One day instead of 2 days. That's the idea. But it doesn't work if we're going to not have people there. So I just, again, I'm not, I know things happen, but we really need that commitment here. So, and I know you said you're going to be gone on the 26th. Okay, you can, okay, well can we zoom in? Okay, all right, so we can do that. That's okay, that's all right. I mean, we're just doing the best we can, that's all. So if we're going to commit to that we'll plan on an 8:30 start in Pasco County. Board meeting goes to 10 o'clock, we're done.
There's no 19th meeting?
No night, we would be eliminating, the proposal, we'd be eliminating the 19th and coming back on the 26th for an hour-and-a-half board meeting and then a 4-hour workshop. So we're done at 2. So you'll be there to say, hey, by the way, your meeting should be ending now. Yeah, but we'll do our best. I mean, and if we, we'll try to, do as quickly as we can.
Okay, didn't realize I had that power.
Well,
One of my
we're just letting you
superpowers.
think you do, and right now you do.
All right.
Is everybody?
It really is important.
It
because
is.
You'll get tired, and remember, we're kind of upping the ante each time,
I know.
in terms of
I know.
the kind of thinking and
Yeah.
I always say in a lot of my mediations that I don't say, I say it every time, is that the reason mediations fail, the main reason is emotions. And when people get tired, that hits really hard.
Yeah.
And before we can even stop that. So that's why we want people fresh on this, because the next discussion is going to be a little bit harder. And we want to make sure,
Just look at it this way. We'll be stretching out for an hour and a half and getting ready. And we'll hit the ground running
That's good.
at
We
10
got
o'clock. And so if the three updates being a little update on the saltwater, what's going on.
Detail plan.
Yeah, and then the permit.
And then the reclaim credits.
reclaim credits.
Yes, sir.
So those 3 topics, plus any consent agenda.
Yeah, there's a couple of contracts that are large, they'll be real quick.
All right, you see, you got an hour and a half now.
And right now, of course, the schedule has been approved for the board meeting on the 19th. And so we do have the schedule for the workshop on the 26th. Is there anything that we need to do, Mr. Bonaventura, in regard to, this is a workshop, as far as any board direction or changes? Is there anything that we need to do to accommodate that?
Notification-wise?
From a procedural type direction?
Do we have enough time for the 26th to do whatever we need for notification purposes?
Yes, we have plenty
To
of time.
make-
And, we've received direction here from the board. Of course, there's no action that can be taken today. This is a workshop.
Right.
But we have direction, staff can change the schedule
Okay,
accordingly.
and we have time.
We have plenty of time
Okay.
to do the notifications,
Okay.
yes.
you good procedural.
Okay, does that sit well with everybody? I mean, okay. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay.
Okay, now we're going to have,
Where is the lunch here?
I would presume.
I'm not seeing boxes or. They're out
The
there.
boxes are outside.
Why don't you bring the lunches in? I mean, we're just going to discuss the last items, but that is a.
Okay, why
brief
don't,
discussion.
can
Is that good?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started with the last item?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we're sensitive to the 1 o'clock time frame.
Okay,
And
yeah.
somebody, somebody will bring them in,
Yeah, I mean, the last items are really the next steps.
Which we've just been talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about most of the items, and, first part is, summary of the accomplishments today. Obviously, we've had a pretty good discussion about the issue of the wholesale potable water supplier and dealing with reclaimed water. And I think everybody understands all these interests that were put up here. And in our discussion, I think everybody's starting to understand some of the concerns that each of the member has. And hopefully, once this gets written up into the facilitation summary, you'll be able to reflect on that. And then we can take to that next step, which is that brainstorming that we're going to have. And by the way, I do want to add in the summary of the accomplishments, I thought the stories this morning were, the personal stories that people told were absolutely excellent. It was, and those are really, really important. I can't tell you how breaking bread with somebody or sharing a story like that is important. And I thought the stories were just excellent. As far as action items, probably the biggest action item is your utility directors need to become involved in this brainstorming session. And we're hoping that you share with the utility directors the worksheet number 2 as far as the idea of being very open-minded, all of that. You'll see the workshop number. I mean, the worksheet. I didn't mean workshop.
Was it with what you said
the
this
worksheet
time?
number 2. It's in your agenda. Is it not there? Yeah. Yeah. It's in there.
Okay.
You can you'll. It'll be in the I'm sure in the summary that we provide. Huh?
Rules of brainstorming.
That's what it is?
Yeah, that's what it is. Worksheet.
I don't have that here, so I don't know why, but probably me not printing.
It was on purpose.
Me not printing correctly.
Yeah.
So.
You have my notes.
Ooh, thank you.
But also, and again, we'll put the important stuff in the
okay.
In the facilitation summary. You should have within a week to 10 days. The other thing, consider that SWOT analysis as you're brainstorming, and because I think that would be interesting for the parties to say, yes, this is this moves us into one of our weaknesses, or this is our strength, or this is an opportunity. But just consider it as you go forward. So we know what the next meeting is going to be. Does anybody have any other topics that you want to cover? I think this will be plenty of topic.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
anything that you can think of?
We can also give that some thought. This will be the last workshop that we have scheduled.
Yeah.
And
Put
then
your,
we've got holidays.
You got your thing? Okay.
Then we got holidays coming up, so we're probably not going to have any further workshops anytime soon. So Carlos and I will think, what's a good way to get us to a good stopping point in addition to doing the brainstorming with this workshop.
And I think just a reminder, at the beginning of the conversation today, we're going to move to a monthly meeting for Tampa Bay Water, and hopefully the meetings will be a little bit shorter, with the exception of a substitute meeting with a workshop.
Mm-hmm.
So if we see a need, again, at the end of next meeting, that another one would be valuable, let's just say in March, we would have a regular board meeting in January, February, and then March we would do a retreat or a workshop, and then go back to the regular. So that's the way we're going to try to do it. So we'll have some built-in,
You won't be Kathleen won't be burdened with this challenge of trying to find dates.
Hopefully we can work around. The only thing that might be different is we get together at 9:30. Sometimes we try to be done by 1 at the latest because our members need to get. So we might be a little shorter workshop, or maybe just extend the meeting a little bit. But we can work around that. So if you guys say, let's target March for a workshop, then staff can plan accordingly, and we can too.
Okay.
Okay?
Let me just say a couple of things that I heard that I think are kind of important. I heard really strongly that you all want to continue as a regional organization. Even those who had some concerns about how things were going, including you, Councilman Miranda, and Commissioner Merman, said, no, I want Tampa Bay Water to continue. I also heard affirmed what's in your interlocal agreement, that reclaimed water belongs to the member governments. But I also heard people say, well, we'd like to see what we can do cooperatively with that resource. We're going to have to find out some answers to some questions if people are doing projects on their own, how that affects Tampa Bay Water and affects Tampa Bay Water's ability to plan and meet its obligations. but I also got a sense that you all feel that's potentially a manageable thing.
Anything is manageable if we can keep this organization functioning well together. So
Okay.
I think it's worth the effort. So, it may take us several more meetings, but
If governments are going out on their own, is Tampa Bay Water not being responsive? Or what is the underlying issue there? And I think that's something that really needs to be dived into. Because I remember a couple years ago, Tampa Bay Water wasn't responsive to the utility directors. We kind of had to force it. And so I think, I'm just bringing that up because if we're going to get to the root of the problem, that needs to be discussed.
Okay, so the concern that you're raising is if member governments are wanting to go out on their own, then that may be an indication that Tampa Bay Water isn't being responsive enough.
yeah, and I think that's, again, I don't want to bring things up that we talked about at the August meeting, but there was discussion about the last 5-year audit, the performance audit. So embedded in that is there's some room for improvement. Maybe this kind of conversation it's important to have. As uncomfortable as it can be, that understanding what the real drivers are behind things are important to know. And so, again, I've said it to others, we have to do it too. Look in the mirror sometimes, Sometimes it's not too far away where the problem is.
Yeah.
So we just need to be very, open, as you said, open-minded to the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Right.
Of our organization. And there's good. There's maybe some stuff that we got to work on. So,
Okay.
I'm certainly open to that because, none of us are perfect by any stretch.
Yeah.
So,
And what Commissioner Merman said reminded me, very simple, again, in negotiation terms, basically saying if Tampa Bay Water is not working, we need to look at an alternative.
yeah.
If it's not working for, say, Hillsborough County, you got to look at the alternative. So when you do that, it's looking at, in a negotiation terms, it would be, what is your best alternative to a negotiated agreement?
Yeah.
The BOTNA thing. What is your best alternative? But what people often fail, and I just ask you all to consider this, they often fail to consider
The alternative.
all of that, which is usually a heck of a lot of other things that you're not thinking of.
Yeah.
And so it's always good to think, what is that alternative? But what is the short-term, long-term,
Yeah.
financial costs, other intangibles that are part of that alternative? But yes, obviously, if it's not working, what other choices do you have?
Yeah. Frustrated reactions, we all have them. So I think to your point, we constructively look at alternatives because it's not always greener. So as long as we're looking at all of it, and look, all of it's on the table. At the end of the day, if St. Petersburg's not happy about something, we need to listen. If
Exactly.
Newport Richey's not happy about something, or Tampa, we did. And by the way, this was the first year that we started talking about having our utility directors present the state of Pinellas County as far as water goes, and maybe some of the challenges or issues that we have. And then Hillsborough, we're in that process right now so that our utilities can have more direct communication with our board. The idea was to start having that dialogue freely without necessarily Tampa Bay Water staff being in the middle of that. So we wanted to have that accessibility by our utility directors to this board. That was one of the reasons. Now, maybe the second go-around will even be better than the first go-around. The first go-around, I think, has been very informative and good, but maybe a little soft, and maybe we can, in the spirit of being constructively critical, we can add as we go along. So,
I think it's important to recognize that the tension that you see is natural. It's inherent in trying to have an effective regional organization. And it's what Commissioner Merman was saying, you all are at different places. And there's sovereignty issues and pride and lots of things that get brought to the table here that make it challenging. So it's not surprising that we're at this point. It's all you got to do is think about Brexit. It's analogous.
I guess anger is not always a bad emotion. It means you care, right? I get it.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
And you know, and while it is scary talking about, gosh, breaking up Tampa Bay Water or something like that because of some of these conflicts, while it is scary now, you work yourself through it, this organization would be much stronger. It's, you know, the old idea of a tree being buffeted by wind makes the tree stronger. Once if you work yourself through this, you will have learned to work yourself through a really hard problem, and I think you will. But you will have learned how to do that, and the organization as a whole will be stronger. And like any organization in any county or any municipality, we're all learning as we're going through, and there's got to be changes. And sometimes the changes are a little bit painful, but changes that need to be made in order to keep the organization strong. So I think even though it is scary waters you're in, if you go through this, the organization will be much stronger in solving future problems.
yeah, really, I think some people have made comments from the beginning. This is the history of this organization is rich in tradition. It's rich in expertise. It's rich in strong leadership from different folks that started us back in the late 1990s and into the early 2000s. And I mean, we owe it to them, and we owe it to our residents of today, and obviously our grandkids of tomorrow, to make sure that we're here doing the very best we can to come up with a solution to challenges that we have. I mean, at the end of the day, if we're not doing that, then we're not doing our job. Now, in the end, we may not find them. I think we will.
Yeah.
But as you keep saying, be open-minded to those solutions. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're done.
Yeah, appreciate it.